Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Welcome to the Senate Finance Committee. Today is Friday, February 27th. We all love working on Fridays. We are going to hear 9 bills today. I'm going to read sort of the bill order. It will probably change as we go. Senate Bill 585, and Micaiah, you can come to the table and bring Secretary Addicks and Troy Stovall from TEDCO can also come to the table. The next bill will be 893, 891, 894, then 546, 560, 656, 783, and 881. I just want to remind everyone that the sponsor gets as much time as she needs. Everybody else gets 2 minutes. Please respect the timer because there's a lot of people here and you want to be fair to the people that are coming behind you. But with that, Micaiah Polk, you can present Senator Gazzoni's bill.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Micaiah Polk, and I'm here on behalf of Senator Gazzoni to present Senate Bill 585, the Human Relevant Research Fund Collection of Contribution Responsible Entity Bill. In 2023, this committee considered and the legislature overwhelmingly passed the Human Relevant Research Fund to provide grants to Maryland scientists developing non-animal research methods grounded in human biology. The program is funded through a dedicated mandatory annual contribution paid by facilities in Maryland that use animals in research, and the grant program is coordinated through TEDCO. Senate Bill 585 is a legislative fix that transfers responsibility for collecting these annual contributions from the Department of Health to the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Health has requested this change, noting that it does not have familiarity with the entities required to pay the annual contributions. Secretary Addicks has offered that the Department of Agriculture, given its work with the USDA and its role in administering the animal health program, is better positioned to manage this responsibility efficiently and effectively. Maryland enacted the Human Relevant Research Fund to advance the promise of innovative human-based research methods and to address well-documented limitations of relying heavily on animal studies. Senate Bill 585 does not alter the purpose or funding structure of the Human Relevant Research Fund. It simply ensures that the annual contributions are collected by the agency best equipped to do so, allowing the program to function as intended. And we respectfully request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Addicks.
Thank you very much, Chair Beidel, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity, the rare opportunity to join this committee for a moment to speak at this really important issue. And I'll say just very briefly that what this bill does is it makes for a more efficient government regulatory process. MDA, unlike MDH, has long existing relationships with the USDA and with APHIS and with the federal partners who already oversee a lot of these labs. And so we've got those relationships built in, and it will just make for a more efficient process. So we are happy to take this on if it is the committee's wishes, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Troy.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Troy Lamel Stovall, the CEO of TEDCO. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. We stand in support of this bill. Again, it's just the economics of how it gets collected, but I just want to reemphasize very quickly the importance of what this is about. As you all know, TEDCO is about innovation and bringing those innovations to market. And part of innovation is actually changing the process. And this really is to think differently about how we think about testing and how to bring these testing for these pharmaceutical products to market and using tools other than animal testing to do that. So we stand in favor of this and welcome any questions on it. Thank you.
Gee, Senator Kramer has a question. I can't imagine. Senator Kramer.
No, Madam Chair, thank you. Though not a question, I just want to say thank you to Secretary Addicks for stepping up to the plate and ensuring that the duties that we have created under this legislation are fulfilled. So thank you for that, Secretary. Appreciate your stepping up to the plate and getting it done. That's all.
Appreciate that.
It's a great bill.
I want to compliment our presenter today. She is a fellow in the Budget and Tax Committee, and you did a very nice job, Micaiah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That ends this committee. You all are free to go if you'd like.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
except Micaiah, she has to stay till the end. We have one unfavorable, Laura Bogley, Maryland Right to Life. maybe. I don't see her. Okay, Laura doesn't seem to be here. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 585. I see no other questions. Thank you all very much. Next, we have Senate Bill 893, Business Regulation Rounding Cash Transactions Authorization, Senator Guile. She's going to bring up Kaylee Locklear and Mike O'Halloran.
Did you see her in the hall? We're looking for Kaylee. But I'll get started. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Dawn Guile, District 33, here to present Senate Bill 893. Every single day in Maryland, cashiers and small business owners are now being asked to solve a problem that Congress created but never finished fixing. The penny is disappearing from circulation. In many places, it is effectively already gone, yet our laws still assume that every transaction can be settled down to the exact cent. So what happens in the real world? Retailers are making it up as they go along. Some round up, some round down, some absorb the loss themselves, and some pass it along to customers. And right now, there is no consistent statewide legal framework telling them what they are permitted to do. Recent reporting here in Maryland has shown that businesses are already being forced to round cash pennies simply because they cannot obtain pennies through normal banking channels. Without federal or state guidance, stores are left to independently decide how to handle transactions at checkout, creating inconsistency for consumers and growing concern among retailers about compliance and financial loss over time. Yes, those pennies add up. And without a fair and uniform way of sorting this out, some retailers are effectively subsidizing hundreds or even thousands of transactions every week to complete a sale. Senate Bill 893 brings order to what is quickly becoming retail chaos. The bill authorizes symmetrical rounding of cash transactions to the nearest 5 cents after all discounts are applied and after all taxes and fees are calculated. Electronic payments, of course, remain exact to the cent. Taxes continue to be calculated on the actual purchase price, preserving tax integrity. Under this approach, totals ending in 1, 2, 6, or 7 cents round down. Totals ending in 3, 4, 8, or 9 cents round up. Over time, that is mathematically neutral. Consumers are protected, merchants have clarity, and no one is consistently advantaged or disadvantaged. Senate Bill 893 draws from the NCSL's 2025 report on penny elimination to establish a framework that is fair to consumers, workable for businesses, and consistent for state administration. The Comptroller's Office has been clear that if rounding is going to occur, it must happen after taxes, and it must be applied consistently across the state. This legislation reflects exactly that. It also preempts a patchwork of local rules that could otherwise create confusion for both businesses and consumers. And for these reasons, I respectfully ask a favorable report on Senate Bill 893.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. The senator covered many of my points. I will just say this bill does reflect the best practices in industry. It provides clarity for consumers and retailers, reduces legal uncertainty, and ensures equitable treatment in cash transactions while preserving accurate tax collection. I am glad to answer any questions about this. It is bipartisan model legislation that's being introduced across the country. We would appreciate a favorable report. Again, glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran. I'm here today representing the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors Association, which is your convenience store owners and operators, and we are in full-throated support of Senate Bill 893. I want to thank the sponsor for taking the lead on this. As Ms. Locklear indicated, I think the sponsor did a great job of kind of going through not only what the bill does, but just some of the surrounding implications. Talked about NCSL. Now this is model legislation. One thing the only thing I'd add is, we're in many senses we're not breaking the mold on this. We're not even plowing new ground. Canada, our neighbors to the north, they ceased production of their penny. I believe it was 2013. And they effectively do the same thing, this idea of symmetrical rounding. The final thing I'll add, I promise, is that this is just allowing. retailers to do this. So I think that's an important note to make. But it does give guidance where the U.S. Treasury Department in November of last year gave its own non-binding guidance. So obviously it's up to us here in the States to take lead on this. So that's why we're very thankful that Senator Guile took up that baton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? Oh, here we go. Senator Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So just I guess a background understanding question. So when we look at gas stations and their prices that are on signs, they're down to, they list the price plus 0.9 of a cent, I guess. So when you're charged for gas, aren't they already rounding in that instance? Because, we can't pay 0.9 of a cent. Right.
Correct. They are rounding, I believe, and I don't have the statute in front of me, but that would be to the nearest penny. This would allow by a factor of 5 cents.
Did they need authority to be able to round that 0.9 of a cent? Is that
That's a great question. I will follow up with you
Is
on
that
that.
in statute already?
I will follow up with you on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Senator Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just interesting, somebody brought up sales tax. How is that rounded?
So what this bill does is it gives you the total amount.
Right.
And this makes it abundantly clear, and I will say this, and I neglected to mention this, we get a call, I don't know, a couple of times a week now. For a while it was every day. What are we actually assessing sales tax on? So the total amount after discounts or any other applications is what you're going to apply sales tax on. So it's the total of the cost of the good.
Right. No, but I was just wondering specifically to sales tax. So for instance, if the tax ends up being, because that's just a simple percentage, it's 6% on top
Sure.
of a number, and at some point in time, that's going to be a fraction. It's going to be, 28.53 would be the number. Is that just always rounded up?
It's the actual price prior to rounding
The actual price prior?
of the good, whatever it is.
No, I know your bill, but I just wondered, do you know how the sales tax is rounded? What we do with that
I
specifically?
think what you're saying is that if something is $19.99, let's say, and you're taking 6% of that, and if the total, I guess I can't do math right now quickly in my head, but let's say it's like 0.637 or something is what that percentage is.
Right.
Are you saying, do you round up or you round down from the tax? I don't have the answer to that. I'm sure we can
I know
find
it
that
doesn't-
out. but-
it's just a component of this bill, but
Sure.
just when it was brought up, it just made me wonder how that is rounded as well.
Rounding is only applied at the point of sale when paid in cash, period.
Yeah, nope, I understand your bill.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
All
I
right.
understand what your bill is trying to do with the, rounding that up. I was just, as a component of finding the final sales price, I was just curious, does the sales tax always round up?
We can find that
I
out.
have the answer.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Go. Did you
Because
go
I Google it.
I knew it.
Again.
Madam
You could have
Chair.
Googled it too, Senator. I don't know.
That's no fun.
Save the
The third
question.
decimal place is a 5 or higher, the tax rounds up. If 4 or lower, it rounds down. Most states require rounding at the item level or invoice total through practices, though practices vary, and cash transactions might round to the nearest nickel, but.
There we have
But,
it.
yeah, there you
We
go.
just saved Marylanders tons of money by rounding down. So I appreciate you doing that, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Senator
That's
Lamb?
another question.
Sorry, forgot that I had a follow-up question. This pertains to the wage side, because I know there's been a lot of focus on the sales and retail side, but this also causes wages to round up or round down, right? And in other states that have other states done this?
Numerous states have actually promulgated regulations around this and passed laws because this
On
is,
the rounding?
yes.
Has that included states that have passed laws on rounding wages downward too?
No, and if I may, this was not a part of what we submitted, and it was drafted in the bill. We are amenable to any changes on this. That was not a part of the model legislation we submitted. So yes, in the back
But,
part
so
of
it is
the
in the
bill.
that's not your preference to
And I
have that.
defer
No.
to the sponsor on this.
Right, I think there was an amendment, we were submitting, that's my understanding.
Yeah,
Right,
to remove this
Yeah.
if the committee wants us to, although we did pass a Pay Stub Transparency Act. So wages would round up or down based on the principles that are in this bill. But I just want to be clear on this. Pay Stub Transparency mandates that we are disclosing that to the employee. So whether you're rounding up or down based on a penny, like that would be very clear to an employee.
And it would only apply to cash.
Right, but so.
Cash only.
Right, who
too.
gets paid in cash these days is your wage.
right.
Those are not our members, so this was a weird part of what came into this bill.
I mean, I'm fine with striking that ultimately from this bill, but I mean, I don't know how many people are, and honestly, if they're getting paid cash, I don't think there may be other reasons for that.
I mean,
We'll
it
just go
seems-
that way.
It seems weird that
You
your
know how much-
babysitter is like $51.36. That's rounding up, no, down.
Yeah.
Down, sorry.
Yeah, I'm fine with removing that. Just make it easier.
All right, so you're open to removing the
Yes.
wage part of this
Yeah.
Yep.
bill? Okay.
I don't see any other questions. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 893. Senator Gall, if you'll stay, bring up Dr. Larry Polsky, Kira Boshi, Micaiah Goldman-Berg, Dan Martin, and Anna Rodney. It's Senate Bill 891.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, for the record, Senator Don Guile, District 33, here to present Senate Bill 891. Senate Bill 891 is about something deeply human, what happens to a mother's mental health during pregnancy and in the year after she brings a child into the world, and whether we catch problems early enough to help her. In Maryland, mental health conditions are among the leading causes of pregnancy-related deaths. Nationally, 1 in 5 women experience a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. These conditions are common, treatable, and too often missed. Providers describe mothers sitting quietly in exam rooms, attending their prenatal or postpartum visit, answering the standard questions, and going home still struggling with depression, anxiety, or trauma. Some don't recognize what they're experiencing, others are afraid to say it out loud, and many face practical barriers once a problem is addressed. Referral delays, unclear coverage, or difficulty navigating the system during an already overwhelming period. Senate Bill 891 addresses those gaps in 3 ways. First, access. The bill requires standing referrals to mental health providers during pregnancy and for 1 year postpartum. That removes repeated administrative hurdles during a clinically vulnerable window. If symptoms emerge or resurface, the pathway to care is already in place. Second, coverage clarity. Perinatal mental health screenings are already covered preventive services under federal guidelines and are typically incorporated into prenatal and postpartum care, often through global billing arrangements. DBMM's letter raises concerns about a potential double billing because screenings are already covered by insurers as part of prenatal and postpartum care. We want to be clear, though, the intent of this legislation is not to create a new reimbursable service line or allow providers to bill twice for the same screening. Providers would not double bill under this bill. The purpose is to clarify reimbursement expectations and eliminate ambiguity that can discourage consistent screening, not to generate new claims outside of existing coverage structures. The fiscal estimate reflects that context, and we'll be separately engaging with DBM to understand what additional clarifying language would be helpful to make that intent explicit. Third, infrastructure. The bill directs Department of Health to identify validated screening tools, disseminate evidence-based materials, and strengthen referral pathways. It builds within existing systems. It does not create a new standalone program. Untreated perinatal mental health conditions do not remain small. They escalate into emergency room visits, inpatient admissions, lost productivity, and in the worst cases, preventable mortality. Early identification connection to care reduces downstream fiscal and human costs. This legislation reflects recommendations from the 2017 Maternal Mental Health Task Force and priorities elevated in the 2025 Maryland Mom Strategic Plan. It recognizes that perinatal behavioral health requires structure and consistency, particularly in a time of provider shortages and economic stress for families. Perinatal mental health conditions are treatable. The question is whether our system reliably connects mothers to that treatment. I also want to thank Delegate White Holland for her partnership and leadership on the House side. She's done a lot of work with me on this bill, and I'm really grateful. And for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 891. We can talk about that. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Larry Polsky. I am here on behalf of the Maryland Association of County Health Officers in support of SB 891 with sponsor amendments. This bill aims to better identify and treat pregnant and postpartum women with mental health and substance use conditions. The most recent Maryland maternal mortality report documented that behavioral health conditions are responsible for over 3 times more deaths than the next leading cause. In addition, according to the 2025 Maryland Maternal Innovation Report, 40% of women with severe pregnancy or postpartum complications had underlying mental health and/or substance use conditions. This is more than any other contributing factor, including obesity and hypertension. Because of the rapid hormonal and other physiological changes that take place during pregnancy and postpartum, health problems can develop and accelerate at a greater pace than in other times in people's lives. As a result, repeating mental health and substance use screenings during each trimester and again at intervals during the first year after pregnancy is critical to ensuring that conditions will be diagnosed at a point when medical and social support interventions can prevent dire consequences, such as suicide attempts and overdoses, or harm to an infant as a result of unintended neglect. 2 of the main recommendations from the Maryland Maternal Health Innovation Program are 1, to enhance screenings, counseling, and medical therapies for behavioral health conditions, including substance use disorders, depression, and anxiety, and 2, increase pregnancy and postpartum referrals and connections to services. SB 891 will codify advancements toward these goals. We thank Senator Guile for working with stakeholders to craft this bill into legislation that can greatly improve the health and safety of pregnant and postpartum women and their children. On behalf of the Maryland Association of County Health Officers, we respectfully request a favorable report.
Madam Chair, I do see Delegate White Holland right behind me with her junior delegate.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Dan Martin with the Mental Health Association of Maryland. And I just have to say, this is one of my favorite bills this session, and I'm so happy to be here in support of Senate Bill 891. A bill whose time is well past due, and I'm so excited about the impact that this could have. As you heard, obstetric complications or postpartum depression is the most untreated obstetric complication in the United States. And all those, that and other perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are treatable once recognized. 75% of them are never identified. And so, that being the case, it led this legislature, and I'm dating myself here. I remember back in 2015, sitting in the same seat and in front of the same committee where legislation originated in this committee that created the task force to study maternal mental health. That report came out with a lot of really robust, comprehensive recommendations. Some of them were addressed, but some of the more impactful ones were never enacted, and that's what this bill would do. And I'm so thankful to Senator Guile and Delegate White Holland for kind of bringing all the stakeholders together, kind of hashing out all these differences. I know there's some sponsor amendments which we're in strong support of, but just really think that this is going to have such a huge impact for Maryland mothers and their children and their families that I couldn't be more happy to support this. And I also want to say that the Maryland Children's Behavioral Health Coalition supports this as well, which is a coalition of nonprofit consumer and family advocacy groups, peer-led organizations, providers, professional associations, health systems, and more. And so, again, couldn't be more supportive, and thank you very much for considering, and please pass Senate Bill 891. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Anna Rodney, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the Doula Alliance of Maryland. I also serve as the Policy and Systems Change Chair for March of Dimes, representing Maryland, and as the President of Maryland Families for Safe Birth. And I am, most importantly, the mother of 2. I am here in strong support of Senate Bill 891, bringing my personal story of what brought me to this work. When my oldest child was born prematurely, I came out of emergency surgery to learn that my son might not make it through the night. I was in shock, terrified, and physically and emotionally depleted, and yet no one screened me. No one proactively assessed my mental state in the midst of that trauma, and I had to ask for help myself. That meant I had to detach myself enough from my own pain to calmly request a therapist. When I did, I was asked, quote unquote, "Are you having thoughts of killing yourself?" Because I was not actively suicidal, my need was not treated as urgent. And as a Black woman, I am acutely aware of the narrow space we are allowed to occupy. If I am calm, my pain can be minimized. If I am visibly distressed, I risk being labeled dramatic or unstable. Either way, the burden is on me to prove that I deserve care. The next morning, a social worker was assigned because of my son's needs, not because of my request, and I had to again advocate for myself before I was prescribed medication and referred to therapy. No mother should have to perform crisis to qualify for support. No woman in the middle of trauma should have to self-identify and self-advocate just to be screened. This is why Senate Bill 891 matters. I'm asking for a favorable report respectfully for Senate Bill 891.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Kyra Vachi. I'm here today as a maternal mental health advocate, as a founder of Andrea's Wish Foundation, and as a representative of Postpartum Support International Maryland chapter. We are in strong support of Senate Bill 891. I'm also here because of my sister, Andrea. Andrea gave birth to her beautiful son, Harbor, on August 24th, 2023, and like so many mothers, she struggled silently in the months that followed. She loved her baby deeply. She wanted to be well, but she fell through the cracks of a healthcare system that screens without always ensuring connection to care. She was identified as struggling, but there was no clear, urgent pathway, no coordinated follow-up, no rapid response. And 3 months later, after giving birth, Andrea died by suicide, one day after her 35th birthday on December 11th, 2023. Our family lives every day with the reality that her death may have been preventable if there had been stronger systems in place, if a positive screen had triggered immediate action, clear referrals, and real follow-up. Postpartum depression and psychosis are treatable. This is why this bill matters so deeply to me. Expanding screening, strengthening insurance coverage, and requiring provider education are critical and long overdue. I urge you to ensure that screening does not become a checkbox. When a mother screens positive, that must trigger action. We need a standardized care activation process and a required response protocol so providers know exactly what to do next. Referrals must happen quickly. Access to trained specialists must be timely. Care coordination and follow-up must be built into the process so families are not left to navigate it alone. Because when a mother finally says, "I'm not okay," delays can be dangerous. In the postpartum period, weeks matter, even days matter sometimes. Andrea's story is not rare, and that is exactly the problem. I cannot change what happened to my sister, but together we can change what happens next for Maryland mothers and families. On behalf of PSI Maryland chapter and in honor of Andrea and her son Harbor, I'm asking you from the deepest place in my heart to strengthen this bill so that another family is spared the pain of a preventable tragedy that mine carries every single day. Thank you for your time and your leadership, and especially to Senator Guile and Delegate White-Holland. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Mika Goldman-Berg, and I strongly support Senate Bill 891. I am deeply grateful to Senator Guile, Delegate White-Holland, and the broad coalition of stakeholders who helped shape this bill. It represents an important and necessary step forward for Maryland families. I wear many hats: Assistant Director of the Postpartum Support International, or PSI, Chapters Program, a Policy Fellow with the Policy Center for Maternal Mental Health, a member of both the PSI Maryland and Chamber of Mothers chapters. Today, I'm here as a mother who fell through the very healthcare gaps this bill seeks to close. One of the primary reasons I'm here today, not just in Annapolis, but on Earth, is because my family had the financial means to pay out of pocket for specialized perinatal mental health care. Without these resources, I have no doubt I would have succumbed to the severe depression, anxiety, and intrusive thoughts that overtook me after the birth of my second daughter. Even with access to the best care possible, I encountered profound shortcomings in our system. I was shamed for not breastfeeding while on life-saving medication. One nurse informed me of my alarmingly high screening score, yet simply walked out of the room without referrals or follow-up. Another licensed provider told me perinatal mental health conditions were quote unquote made up and advised me to discontinue my medication. That kind of misinformation is dangerous. We need better training for medical providers across disciplines. Fully 20% of mothers experience a perinatal mental health condition. They are the leading cause of maternal mortality. When not properly treated, these conditions can be devastating, not only for the mother herself, but for her family, neighborhood, and community. It truly takes a village. No family's survival should hinge on whether they have the means to self-fund care or wade through misinformation. You are the villagers who can and must help to support Maryland families. Expanding screening, strengthening coverage, and requiring provider education are critical. Senate Bill 891 moves us forward toward a better system of care. I respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Gow, thank you for bringing this bill, really important bill. You know, we had MDH and another group of folks in front of us talking about a task that was a task force that was developed. They looked at all the pieces of legislation that we passed here in the state that MDH just did not implement at all, and they sat there for years in there to, you know, until we got to this task force that showed us that they didn't implement these, and for years they never implemented it. What's in this bill that's going to help require or provide some type of teeth to make MDH do this? Obviously, there's the other piece of the bill that talks about insurance having coverage, but it's really important that something like this, that we do it with fidelity and not just to say that we've done it, right? So is there something in the bill that provides teeth to make MDH actually do this?
I mean, I'm happy to answer the question. I mean, I'm not sure, other than what we can do as far as working with MDH, we can, you know, to really.
It's not all MDH, you know?
But yeah, certainly. Do you want to add
I mean,
more,
I just
Dan?
think a lot of the parts of the bill, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not all MDH, you know. Some of it's kind of requiring providers to deliver certain information at certain, you know, wellness visits and in the prenatal period. A lot of it's requiring screening of, again, providers to do these screenings, you know. And so it's not all on MDH. A lot of it's kind of payer-based and provider-based, things like that.
Yes, but you get my point.
I do. I do. Like I said, I
it's-
was here in 2015 when we passed that last one, and I've been frustrated since then. So I'm so excited for. That's why I'm so excited for this.
I just don't want this to sit on the shelf, and obviously there's other pieces to it, but we have to provide teeth to this piece of legislation to provide the care that's needed for these mothers that really need this service. And so I thank you again for the bill, and I thank you all for sharing your stories and what you go through, what you have gone through too. Thank you.
We could put like we can require MDH to come in and report on how it's going every year.
Well, now you can keep on talking. I'm asking another question. I wondered if MDH has the pens or the ability to do it, right? Do they have do they have personnel that can do this on day one once this bill passes?
I mean, at least according to the fiscal note, it says MDH can implement the bill's requirements using existed budgeted resources. I mean, we could probably certainly discuss with MDH if there, you know, if there are any additional needs. But thank you, appreciate the question. Oh, sure.
Senator Washington, also to keep in mind that there will be a new Deputy Secretary of Behavioral Health shortly, and it's an opportunity right from the beginning of that person's tenure to prioritize this work.
We've seen a lot of people come into these agencies and say they're going to do work, and the work doesn't get done. But thank you for that comment.
Thank you, Senator. We've been talking about the issues with maternal health for as long as I've been here, so it would be very nice to see some movement on it. Senator Reedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder, and I echo my friend from Prince George's comments that I can't think of something much more important that the health department should be doing. There's a lot of important work, of course they do, but it's certainly making sure that we're providing care for people for women carrying children and or just having had children, and making sure that they have the support that they need. What would be the I know the insurers are going to come up with amendments, and I didn't see what they all were, but what would be the course of action? Is this going to be prescriptive as to what a an OBGYN is going to do if you do screen in their office? Like, is there going to be a prescriptive of, okay,
I mean,
someone screens?
there
yeah.
are screens. There are like, and PSI folks can probably talk more specifically about the specific screens, but there are already screens out there. This bill would just require them to do them at certain points. And are you
Okay,
saying,
but-
you're saying if someone's identified?
So if somebody, if they do the screening and it pops, hey, this person's really saying some things or demonstrating some things that show that they could be at risk or they are experiencing this kind of depression, this kind of situation, does this bill do anything to mandate, or is the department going to
doesn't
mandate
mandate.
what steps come next? Or we don't want to get in the middle of somebody and the doctor. I'm just curious
Well,
how.
it doesn't mandate, and I think there are network issues, around kind of, experts in perinatal mental health, certainly, there could be referrals delivered. The bill requires providers to provide new mothers with information and resources about where they can turn, and
Yeah, I
speak
also
up.
will say that MDH has a partnership with Postpartum Support International that started last year. So they are training 75, like a cohort of 75 providers every year to undergo training through Postpartum Support International and receive what's called a certificate in perinatal mental health.
Okay.
Senator Reedy, if I can add from an obstetrician's perspective.
Please.
So currently, the standard from ACOG is a screening at the first prenatal visit and at least one more screening somewhere around the start of the third trimester. So what this bill would do would be to set a new standard of care in Maryland to have a screening each trimester. And I will say that for practicing clinicians, standards of care make a difference in driving behavior when it comes to how we treat patients.
And so then it doesn't necessarily change what happens after that per se, but it makes sure that they're getting checked more often, basically.
Well, and then there are requirements in the bill about postpartum screening as well.
Right, and postpartum screening. Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, if I can point you to the fiscal note, if you haven't checked it out, there's an addendum on mandated health coverage in Maryland. It's really important. It's kind of what we've talked about, who's actually covered by a mandate. So we have 50 mandates in Maryland, but this specifically says overall 17.4% of the state's non-elderly population was covered by a plan subject to state regulation. So I say that because we passed these great bills, and it covers the people that are covered by state insurance, 17.4%. So it's a really good bill, Senator Cowell, thank you. But this is important information for the committee to note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
We now have a panel of favorable with amendment. Sarah Case Heron, Allison Taylor, Christine Crone, Robin Elliott, and Natasha Mayhew.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidle, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the Finance Committee. I'm Christine Crone, here today speaking on behalf of MedChi, the Maryland State Medical Society, the Maryland chapter of the American Academy of Pediatricians, and the Maryland section of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We are in support of Senate Bill 891 with the sponsor amendments, and we also would like to thank Senator Guile and Delegate White Holland for their leadership on this issue. Perinatal mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders during pregnancy and in the first year postpartum, are among the most common complications of pregnancy. They affect roughly 1 in 8 birthing parents and can profoundly impact the parent, the infant, and the entire family. When left untreated, these conditions can disrupt the parent-infant bond, increase the risk of adverse childhood experiences, and negatively affect child development and long-term health outcomes. Early recognition and support are essential, and regular contact with healthcare providers during the perinatal period provides opportunities to screen, identify, and connect families with effective treatment. As organizations representing physicians and pediatric providers, we remain strongly committed to improving perinatal mental health in Maryland. We are thankful for working actively with all the stakeholders to refine the legislation and ensure the amendments address practical and clinical realities. Our shared goal is clear. Every parent should have the opportunity and support that they need, and every child should have the healthiest possible start in life. With the sponsor amendments noted, we support Senate Bill 891.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Allison Taylor. I'm here on behalf of Kaiser Permanente in support of the bill with the sponsor amendments. I will just note pretty much all Kaiser members in the state fall within the 17% that the chair mentioned. So your Kaiser members will be subject to this bill. We do already provide these screenings, although I will say too, if any of you have Kaiser constituents who feel like they're not getting the care that they need, please follow up with me. So with that, we urge a favorable report, and I thank the sponsors who are always really willing to work with stakeholders. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Vital, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Sarah Case-Heron, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Life and Health Insurers of Maryland to express their support with sponsor amendments to Senate Bill 891, Health Insurance and Health Occupations Perinatal Mental Health Conditions. The League is very supportive of this bill's intent to improve perinatal mental health for Maryland residents and the continuation of educational efforts to support providers. We're grateful for the ability to work with the sponsors on this bill and their engagement, and look forward to continuing to work with them on the final language. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Good afternoon, Robin Elliott here on behalf of the American College of Nurse Midwives in support of the bill, and very appreciative of the sponsors' work on sponsor amendments to hone the language. I did want to just raise that we've had great discussions about Senator Reedy's question about what happens after screening. That is definitely something that I think as the work continues, that's a priority. It doesn't necessarily have to be legislative. There are plenty of system innovations that we can do to make sure that people are referred and that they have an appropriate person to see if they screen positive. So there's definitely more work to be done on that, and just wanted to let you know that it is something that we were talking about. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Natasha Mayu here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association in support with amendments on Senate Bill 891. Perinatal mental health conditions are a very important issue. They impact thousands of Maryland families each year. We strongly support strengthening this continuum of care to ensure early identification and treatment. We thank the sponsors for bringing this issue forward and for bringing stakeholders together to work on it and to work on these amendments. We look forward to continuing to refine the language to ensure the bill supports clinical care without unintentionally altering clinical scope of practice. And as we continue this very important work, we just stress and uplift the importance of bolstering the availability of behavioral health providers and continuing efforts to address workforce shortages. We appreciate being at the table. We appreciate working to support mental health conditions for Maryland's families. And with that, we urge a favorable with amendments report on Senate Bill 891.
Thank you. We have a question from Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. And the reason I asked a lot of these questions, we just had a baby boy 9 months ago. So I've experienced my wife going through a lot of these issues, and this experience has been, we're grateful for the hospital that we did have here in Maryland that conducted a screening right after with a social worker, probably about 24 hours later. And my question to you from the Hospital Association, this was a particular hospital that did this. Our first experience, we didn't have that same screening with a social worker. Does that screening happen for all hospitals that deliver babies here in the state? Where a social worker comes by 24 hours later to conduct the screening. Behavior is literally like that's the same screening that you guys are really talking about here. They kicked me out the room too, so I don't know what kind of questions they asked. But they said I had to get out of there, and then they're gonna let her answer the questions. So.
I believe there are screenings that are conducted. I think the importance of this bill is it's trying to ensure that there is a standard, a continuum across the board for the screenings to make sure that they occur more frequently and just across the board.
I would like to know. I would like to know if all hospitals, because then we should make sure that all hospitals that deliver that deliver babies are doing that screening 24 hours. I thought it was really great. My wife really appreciated it, and we didn't have it at the first hospital here in Maryland. And so I think it would be good to have that screening as well. For Allison, you mentioned that, if we need constituent services to call you, can you please give us another number to call? Because I've called multiple times to try to help some of my constituents, and I didn't get a phone call back, or we played a lot of phone tag. So can you please provide us with someone that can really help some of our constituents that go through these types of issues?
Certainly, yeah, I do remember you and I had some back and forth, and I get that. I will send you our VP of Member Services. I'll send it to everybody.
That'd be great.
Call them directly, and our
because we're calling for our constituents, and it'd be good for someone
totally.
to give us a call back when they're having issues.
Cool. I'll send you our president's number too.
Thank you.
I know the right number.
Please share, madam.
Thank you all for this testimony. I don't see any other questions. And we're going to, one more person unfavorable, so. I think, is Laura Bogley here now? Laura wasn't here for the first bill. I don't see Laura, so that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 891.
I am. It's a Don Guile day today. Sorry about that.
So this is the third-party litigation financing, Senate Bill 894. Senator Guile is here with Nancy Egan, Bryson Popham, Carvel Collins, Gina Rotonu, and Jake Whitaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's room for Bob Etten too, we'll squeeze him up here as well. It's okay. All right, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 894 addresses the growing practice of third-party litigation financing, or TPLF, and its impact on Maryland consumers and our civil justice system. The third-party litigation financing generally takes two forms: commercial financing and consumer financing. Both involve advancing funds in exchange for a portion of the proceeds from a settlement, judgment, or verdict, and both often include significant interest rates and fees. Commercial third-party litigation financing typically consists of non-recourse funding provided directly to a plaintiff's attorney or law firm. Senate Bill 894 does not specifically address commercial litigation financing. It's more focused on consumer third-party litigation financing. Consumer third-party litigation financing involves non-recourse funding provided directly to an individual claimant, usually to cover living expenses, like if while you're waiting for your case to resolve, whether it be by settlement or verdict or otherwise. It's money to help with folks with keeping, paying the mortgage or rent, things like that, while the case is pending. If the case is unsuccessful, the consumer has no obligation to repay the advance. If the consumer prevails, however, repayment includes not only the principal advance, but also interest and fees, which can be substantial, including, I've heard, even at 40% of what the payment amount was advanced. Maryland's Office of Financial Regulation has already determined that these consumer litigation funding transactions constitute loan products under Maryland law. This bill codifies that determination and ensures these transactions are regulated consistently within Maryland's existing consumer lending framework. Specifically, the bill requires litigation financiers to be licensed under Maryland lending laws, clarifies that consumer litigation financing consists of a loan for purposes of Maryland law, requires disclosure of litigation financing agreements and civil actions, permits the existence and contents of these agreements to be subject to discovery, and authorizes the commissioner to adopt regulations necessary to implement these provisions. Senate Bill 894 does not prohibit litigation funding, nor does it interfere with contingency fee arrangements between attorneys and their clients. It simply assures that when funds are advanced directly to Maryland consumers, these transactions are transparent and subject to the same consumer protections that apply to other lending products. This bill promotes transparency in civil litigation and protects Maryland consumers from unregulated, high-cost lending practices presented as litigation advances. I have submitted a sponsor amendment, which is a simple deletion of language that does not apply to consumer lending. And for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 894. Just over here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Gina Rotuno, and on behalf of the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, we appreciate the opportunity to share our support for Senate Bill 894. At its heart, Senate Bill 894 promotes transparency and fairness in Maryland's legal system. It simply ensures that when a third-party funder is involved in a lawsuit, that information is known to everyone. This clarity helps all parties better understand what's driving a case, evaluate damages, and make decisions based on facts. The bill also creates a clear, practical regulatory framework by asking litigation funders to follow Maryland's existing lending laws. This helps protect consumers from unexpected fees or confusing repayment terms. Finally, by making litigation financing agreements discoverable, just like other relevant information, SB 894 supports a more efficient legal process. It can help reduce inflated settlement demands, minimize delays, and create a more predictable environment for everyone involved. For these reasons, NAMIC respectfully urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 894.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Robert Etten on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurers Association, in very, very strong support of this legislation. This bill was before your committee last year, and it did not pass. We brought it back. We scaled it down. We limited it to basically to consumer transactions. Your witness package, I saw it today, is about a ½ inch thick with lots of support from different groups, including the Maryland Hospital Association, the Truckers Association, and of course there is opposition. I'll be very clear to a couple points. My first point is that this legislation has been introduced in a number of states. In the state of Utah, when they looked at it and studied it and passed a bill, it said that the annual rate of return for 41 agreements, the 41 agreements that they had, averaged 142.85%. The average dollar cost to the individuals for those agreements was $988 and $580. The rate of return averaged 130.74% for these loans. And these are loans. What you'll hear today is that these are not loans. They are clearly loans. The other thing that I would point out to you is that looking at one of these agreements, it's a 15-page agreement. If you go to the last page, in 4 lines, it says what the fee is for this agreement. And it says that prior to the payment of any amounts from the litigation proceeds, you're to pay to the individual shall pay to the funder without reduction set off, if any, the amounts owed plus an amount without reduction set off or counterclaim equal to the actual funding plus the greater of 50% of the remaining litigation proceeds up to 3 times the actual funding or 30% of the remaining litigation proceeds. These are loans. They need to be regulated as loans. The AG and the Commissioner of Financial Regulation have always said these are loans. We just want it codified. Thank you.
Nancy Egan with American Property Casualty, and I think Bob Etten did a great summary of why we're very concerned. I think in many cases, this was not something people were aware of in America, that there was these 2 types of lending to consumers and to the law firms. And we're just seeing litigation across the country and also on a national level dealing with the lending to the law firms from foreign investors. But this is specific to consumers here in Maryland. We first became much more aware of this when we had the 9/11 settlements, and we found out that some of the lending that was to some of the first responders, that they were being charged 250% return charges against what they were borrowing. For one example, they borrowed $35,000 over a 3-month period and had to pay back $64,000 in that short amount of time. So we are very concerned. We worked with the Office of Financial Reg to draft the legislation, and we had reached out to the AG's Office Consumer Protection Division. We have received some amendments from the opposition, and we are opposed to those amendments. It guts our bill and then adds in language in small print at the end of their amendment saying that they are not subject to the Maryland Maryland loan laws, which we totally disagree with. So with that, we hope you provide us a favorable report, and we support the amendment to remove that one section that's in the bill that does not apply to consumer lending. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Carville Collins, representing Maryland Employers for Civil Justice Reform Coalition. The coalition is comprised of many of the largest employers, businesses, and healthcare providers in Maryland, here in support of Senate Bill 894. The bill takes a simple but effective approach to providing consumer protection for plaintiffs and defendants in civil lawsuits. That approach is to license, regulate, and establish basic disclosure requirements for third-party litigation financing. The need for this bill, I think, is best explained on page 3 of the fiscal note, where it says, state law does not generally regulate litigation financing as defined by the bill. This legislation fills that void, but in a minimal, light-handed way that for the most part focuses on letting all interested parties know of the existence of these agreements in a civil litigation claim. In prior years, and last year this bill was heard by the committee, you have heard all the excuses from the legal financing industry and the plaintiffs' lawyers for not passing this bill. A leading excuse is, but the trial judge can obtain and review these agreements if needed. Well, of course the judge can do this. That's not the point. The point is for the interested parties to the claim, the defendants and the plaintiffs, to be aware and protected in connection with these agreements. Another excuse raised annually is that the litigation financing agreements should not be disclosed because they contain privileged information on litigation strategy. This is a false narrative. To the extent any such agreement contains sensitive or privileged information, that information can be redacted in the normal course as the court determines the validity of the asserted privilege. This bill in no way calls for the disclosure of privileged information. All of the usual protections for this sort of information under current law remain undisturbed. We urge your support. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Bryson Popham, on behalf of the Maryland Association of Mutual Insurance Companies in support of Senate Bill 894. You've heard a great deal of detail about this both last year and this year, so I'm going to be simple and short. This is a consumer protection bill. Litigation is extremely stressful for the parties, both plaintiffs and defendants. This bill gives necessary information to the parties and to their representatives. It doesn't hurt anybody. It simply provides necessary information to make informed judgments. And for these reasons, we respectfully support and urge a favorable report on the bill.
Thank you. Senator, you didn't get everyone to the table, but do you want to do questions? Because there's a couple more of your panel.
That's fine, Madam Chair. We can do questions now and just have Jake from the Hospital Association come up after.
Okay. Senator Kramer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Mr. Enton, are you aware of any of these companies that are addressed in this legislation that are doing business in Maryland at this point?
Well, I think it's one of the problems that we have.
Will you pull the microphone closer?
I'm sorry. That's one of the problems that we have. It's not clear whether they are or they aren't. I can tell you that as recently as 2016, the Commissioner of Financial Regulation went after one of these companies that was doing business in Maryland, and this was the second company that they went after, and that this company entered into an agreement, and while they didn't acknowledge that they had done anything wrong, they agreed to pay a voluntary penalty, quote unquote, of $140,000 to the state of Maryland, and furthermore, they agreed to pay $195,842 to the, quote, according to the company's non-borrowers that they had transactions with. And that's what concerns us. So you had a case involving a company called Oasis, that was the same kind of case, and that was back in 2009. Then all of a sudden, again in 2016, we have another case. And while the Attorney General and the Commissioner of Financial Regulation say that these companies clearly are consumer lenders and are subject to our consumer lending laws, periodically we have companies that just come in and do business. I mean, if it's not like you don't have to pay it back. If you make a recovery, you pay it back, and you pay it back at a rate of interest which is a ton above what a consumer borrower should have to pay in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe this is a question for Carville. One of the things, I remember this bill from last year a little bit, and I was looking back at some stuff. One of the things that I was curious about is the concern that some of the folks who either oppose the bill or want some amendments to it, the revealing of things that have to be revealed to both parties before you've even gotten into negotiations. Can you speak to that a little bit, why you think that is necessary?
So, thank you, Senator, for the question. There we go. There you go. Thank you. Appreciate the question. So included in these agreements may be information that addresses issues such as the hiring of expert witnesses. It might include information about trial strategy. It could have other funding information. We understand and respect that. That's not the information we're seeking to have disclosed. The information we're seeking to have disclosed here is the existence of these contracts, so that all of the parties to a litigation know that they're in existence.
Okay, now it's this what it's stuck in my mind. But if the other party knows this is how it's being funded, doesn't that give them a strategic? Honestly, this was a concern I had last year. Doesn't that give them a strategic advantage before you even start negotiations? You know that you're dealing with somebody who's strapped and had to basically do this loan.
I would not say that's an advantage. That's full disclosure. That's awareness. That's all it is. There's no advantage that comes from that, Senator, in our view. The information that is being sought here is not privileged information, not attorney-client privileged information.
Okay, no, I was just curious about your perspective on it, because that was what I remember. One of the things I remember from last year. You've answered my question. I'm looking into it a little bit more. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to follow up on my colleague's question, Senator Kramer. To what level do we know that these contracts are utilized in Maryland right now? I mean, do we know?
One of the issues, for example, last year when we did an internet search, we came up with a bunch of companies that were advertising lending here in Maryland for cash for lawsuits. That's usually the name they use. Then I went to the Office of Financial Regs website to see if they were licensed, which is what's required under Maryland law. I could not find those names being licensed. Now, I don't know if they're just saying, they have like all the states they're operating on and saying you can submit a name. And of course, I'm not going to that step saying, are they doing it in Maryland? All I know is that they say that they're doing it in Maryland. Maybe when you put your name in, they don't do it. But we do know that they are required to be licensed. And I was surprised because last year we heard testimony, these are small loans. They're just a little bit to think. But one of the websites I went to just yesterday said we can lend up to $2 million. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound to me like a small consumer loan. And that's even more reason why we need to have them regulated and possibly disclosed. So anyway, thank you.
If I could just say this, Senator, in response to your question is, I just don't understand what is the downside to having them be licensed like any other lender. How is this not a loan? Because if the conditions are met, you have to pay it back.
Gotcha. And then I saw other states have licensed and have delved into this and create statutes just for this business practice.
Right.
And this would be very different than what we're proposing here.
Legislation is passed in, I don't know how many different states, a number of states around the country. It's being pushed by hospitals, it's being pushed by insurance companies, it's being pushed by business groups that just want to make sure that these companies are regulated. The statutes vary, obviously, like most statutes do, from place to place. We tried to scale this bill back this year. If you look at last year's bill, it was three times as long as this year's bill. We limited everything basically to consumer transactions because Maryland has very robust consumer protection laws. Some states may fold in commercial transaction. Some states have very hefty disclosure requirements. We tried to keep this simple and just say you got to be licensed as a consumer lender and you got to follow the consumer lending laws.
Thank you.
Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure I understand this correctly, there's commercial legal funding and consumer legal funding. Is this just dealing with consumer?
Yes, we last year's bill was a little bit vague, and we made sure we tailored it just to consumer lending.
Okay.
We are not dealing with the large things that you're hearing on the news about funding lawsuits across the country. That's not this bill.
So it's just the consumers, and as the bill sponsor said, this is funding that they receive from these groups that allow them to pay their mortgage, pay food and rent, things of that nature.
And then the consumer can assign their interest in the proceeds to the lender.
Correct. I mean, right. They're doing that. But I keep hearing that it's considered a loan, but there's no obligation to repay this, right?
There's an absolute obligation to repay it. The obligation is that you recover in your lawsuit, you pay it at an extraordinarily high rate of interest.
And what's the
It
obligation?
does get repaid.
What's the obligation if you lose?
I'm sorry?
What's the obligation if you lose?
There is no obligation, but
Wait a minute, I just heard there was an obligation.
well, there is if you win, and that's the.
Well, wait a
but
minute.
the concern is
That's very different, but I understand, but that's very different. I mean, you just said something extremely different. I said, is this a loan? Because a loan requires that there be an obligation to pay.
Right.
And you said yes. But now
Yes,
you're
but
saying, well, wait a minute, it's dependent on if you win or lose.
But these are called non-recourse loans. They're still called loans, but they have a different variety than a regular loan that you're seeing because you're funding part of the lawsuit.
Okay, but there's not enough.
With extremely high interest rates, too, to be clear.
Well, I mean, but let me go back to this because again, consumer protection. Isn't this all spelled out when the consumer agrees to this? What these high rate of returns are?
I think ultimately.
We don't know.
You don't know?
They're not required to be disclosed. They're saying that they're not regulated, so we don't get to see them. So we don't know.
I'm happy to share with you a copy of one of the agreements. You won't find anything in there that mirrors in any way, shape, or form advice of consumer protections.
Advice of?
About what consumer protections might exist.
Okay, so again, but I mean, we're going back to whether this is a loan or not, and you're stating because it is a loan that it must follow these certain conditions. Let me ask another question, because this bill was heard last year. There's been some changes to it. There's obviously some trade organizations that are out there that represent these businesses that do this. Have you guys got together and tried to resolve this? Because from what I've heard, these groups are willing to be regulated, that they are willing to put some guardrails on, that they are willing to have some caps in place. Have you guys all got together and said, hey, let's see if we can come together and find a way to do this?
So, Senator, they did reach out to us. They sent us a redraft of the bill.
Right.
And they eliminated all of the provisions in the bill that apply to consumer lending. And to us, there wasn't anything to talk about if that was their position.
I think they'll be at the table.
I think one thing I wanted to point out, they took the first part of the bill and made it commercial lending, which we totally have said from the beginning, all we wanted to deal with was consumer lending.
Why don't you want to deal with commercial lending?
That's funding of the lawsuits, and that's just something maybe we'd like to address further down the road, but we're just trying to do this small part, and That's what we're working on, just one section of this concerning third-party litigation financing. Now, I have a quote right from the testimony from last year from the Consumer Protection Division. TPL providers market themselves as increasingly access to justice with little to no risk to consumers since their lending services are contingent and non-recourse consumers, only repay providers if there's a recovery of litigation. Any argument that these loans should be treated differently than other small loans because they are contingent on a successful recovery in litigation is not strong, as the Maryland consumer loan laws explicitly cover these loans. I mean, that's from the Consumer Protection Division.
Well, good for them. I mean, but at the same time, I think most people will very much understand what a loan is. And if somebody's giving somebody money.
So why shouldn't they be licensed?
I'm not saying they shouldn't be licensed. I'm just asking, is this something that will allow them to continue to operate? Because what I'm hearing is it doesn't.
Well, if I can, there's two differences. There's the commercial financing that would help plaintiffs' attorneys, basically a line of credit, so they can pay for things like, expert discovery, they can pay for copying, things like that, because litigation can be very, very expensive. This is focused more on the consumer, like the one to keep the lights on, right? Keep in mind, if somebody is injured, for example, and if you got a lot of money in your bank account, you're going to be able to keep your lights on. You're going to be able to, pay for your rent. You pay for your mortgage. If you're desperate, you go to these companies, and then later, I understand that there may be no recovery otherwise, if you don't settle, they look at all the facts of the case to make a determination of the viability of the claim. And then ultimately, they can charge these huge interest rates on vulnerable people that maybe, that are desperate and hoping at some point in order to get a settlement or a verdict. So, I just wanted to add a little bit of clarification there and some perspective on what is ultimately happening.
You just mentioned something interesting. If somebody is wealthy and they're going through this process, could they sit there and hold out for a higher settlement? Whereas somebody that is not wealthy might say, hey, you know what, I don't have the ability to continue to pay my rent and to do things. I need to settle quickly.
Theoretically, sure. Theoretically, there's lots of different factors that somebody may be considering when they're, making a determination when and if to settle a claim. And I would have to imagine that perhaps one of those issues may be somebody's, access to existing money.
You'd be fine if there was a way to come to an agreement that this can be regulated to keep these companies in business. Are you trying to eliminate these companies altogether and say that the people that can't afford to pay their mortgages shouldn't be able to?
No, we're not. And there's actually, what the interest rate that's charged under, I don't understand why this is not something viable. The interest rate is capped at 33% annually for loans under $1,000, 24% for amounts over $2,000, and for loans between $1,000 and $2,000, the first $1,000 can be charged up to 33%, with the remainder at 24%. So they're making interest rates at either 33 or 24%. Now, you're saying that that's not viable. I think that's viable. So. And that's what the Maryland law is.
You have one, is that one agreement from one company for one specific case? Is that what you're looking at?
No, this is the Maryland law. This is Maryland law, what it is right now. And that's what we're trying to get them to.
Well, this is all, again, based on whether this is a loan or not, correct?
Well, that has been determined by the Office of Financial Reg and some of their settlements already, and the Consumer Protection Division.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And just one question to this panel. Apologize, I had to step out for a phone call. Maybe I missed this, but are there any other companies that are in the state that are operating here in the state of Maryland? Maybe to
Senator Lamb, I know we did get to talk about that. I did a search of the internet and found, I think, 7 companies that were advertising doing this here in Maryland.
Okay.
I don't know. I checked to see if they were on the Office of Financial Reg's list of licensed company. I could not find them. So I don't know if they're operating here and are not licensed, or are they say they're operating here and not doing business here?
wasn't
I'm just
clear.
not sure.
Okay,
But we know that they're advertising here in Maryland.
thank you.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions for this panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
We're gonna
Thank you.
bring up, I guess who we missed, Jake Whitaker and Lauren, maybe? Is that who we missed? Go ahead, Jake.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Jake Whitaker on behalf of Maryland's Hospitals and Health Systems in strong support of Senate Bill 894. I couldn't have laid it out better than Senator Guile and the rest of the panelists on why this bill protects consumers and our liability environment. So I thought I'd take this time to describe how this impacts hospitals. So Maryland's hospitals are uniquely impacted by Maryland's challenging liability environment. As you all know, Maryland works under a unique payment model where we have fixed revenues, fixed budgets, and we can't just raise prices or find new revenue to cover new costs like liability. And we think this is especially challenging now because we're experiencing the transition through the AHEAD model, as well as more than $800 billion in Medicaid cuts on the federal level. And so what this means is that when we spend money on liability costs, that's money that we can't spend on hiring nurses, improving ED wait times, or delivering direct care to your constituents. And so what we're concerned here is that our general counsels are concerned that settlements are being unnecessarily and unfairly dragged out to basically make the rate of return that some of these deep pockets funding these consumer lendings are doing. And so I want to be very clear that hospitals aren't asking or trying to limit access to justice or prohibit these agreements at all. We're simply just asking for disclosure and visibility into who's doing these agreements. Because we know that when funders influence strategy and the settlement posture, we know that it drags out the cases and increases those costs. And that's money that's taken away and given to New York hedge funds instead of to care for your constituents. So for the aforementioned reasons, we are in strong support of Senate Bill 894. Thanks.
Thank you, Jake. Lauren?
Good afternoon, Chair Bidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak on behalf of, in support of SB 894. I'm Lauren Packman on behalf of Allstate. I want to begin by thanking Senator Guile for her leadership on this issue. I think 894 would do two important things to put guardrails in place for third-party litigation financing, which I may refer to as TPLF, just because it's easier and faster. First, it'll protect consumers by establishing a licensing regime. It'll help weed out TPLFs that are intent on unscrupulous or even illegal behavior. And it'll allow consumers to hold bad actors to account if they're victimized by a TPLF, imposing excessive interest rates or superfluous fees on them. As the prior panel noted, the bill would also only require plaintiffs to repay the loan if they're compensated for their loss. So if the plaintiff doesn't win, the lender doesn't get repaid. Second, it will promote transparency among parties to litigation and reduce the need for disputes over disclosure. Mandatory disclosure of TPLF arrangements will free the other parties of the burden of having to litigate the discovery of them. And also, disclosures are especially crucial when there are more than two parties to a case. Every party not involved in the TPLF arrangement is going to have a vested interest in knowing whether it exists. And so there's potential litigation coming from more than just, I think we frequently look at these kinds of bills in the context of one plaintiff, one defendant. But a lot of times there could be multiple plaintiffs and certainly multiple defendants. And anybody who is not a party to that TPLF arrangement is going to have an interest in litigating to figure out if it exists. So the disclosure provision will make the whole suit move more efficiently. It'll ease the path to settlement potentially and save both time and money. The other thing I wanted to just mention in response to something that was brought up in the prior panel is that the identity of people involved in the litigation, those are table stakes. That's not like some sort of special level of information. That should just be a basic thing that everybody knows about. For these reasons, I respectfully request the committee to report favorably on SB 894. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for Lauren or Jake? I don't see any questions. Thank you both for your testimony.
Thanks.
Now we're going to bring up Bruce Bariano, who's favorable with amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I really should have just been signed up favorable, and I'm going to be very brief. I think it's a great bill, and I compliment Senator Guile for it. One thing I would say about it is, from the paperwork I've seen, the compromise and what Mr. Etten held up and everything like that. None of it brings those companies in to be regulated by the Maryland Insurance Administration or any other governmental entity as normal loan companies are. But the only other point I want to make, I'll be very brief, is when all of you come back as reelected, other than the magnificent career and retirement of the chair, there's something that needs to be added to this thereafter. I feel strongly about it. Just personally, I've heard about it over directly to finance litigation. I think they have an absolute clear incumbent, I think under the canons of ethics of lawyers, to tell their client that, because they have skin in the game. Because if that case is settled or what have you, they need to get paid. In other words, they're looking to get it. So I just think once this bill is passed, when Senator Guile comes back and is reelected, I would just suggest that this would be an add-on. But it's very important. I just think disclosure. There's nothing wrong with it, but the party should know that their lawyer has a debt obligation that's in this case, and it has to be satisfied, and it may affect settlement terms, negotiations, or what have you. Thank you very much. I would urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Mariano. Do I have any other questions? So Senator Guile will take care of them when she comes back.
That's right. I'm convinced. I'll work a poll if I have to.
Now I have 4 unfavorables: Eric Schuler, Lorenzo Bellamy, Harrison Hosker, and Michael Winkleman.
And I think there's a remote witness as well, Madam Chair?
Yes, we'll do that.
Very well. Thank
Are they
you.
part of your panel? Do you want them on while you're on the panel? I
It
can
doesn't
bring them
matter.
up.
If you could, that would be
Yeah,
great.
Can we bring, okay, we'll add her.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may begin, Mike Winkleman, on behalf of the Maryland Association for Justice, the trial lawyers. I am a practicing lawyer. We oppose this bill. I want to begin, though, by thanking the sponsor who took time to meet with us individually and collectively. It's always better for us to talk to each other rather than at each other, so we respect that courtesy. We've submitted written testimony, so we refer to members of the panel to that. Our primary concerns are not those which have been exactly addressed here, but have been partially addressed here. And this bill, as drafted, would 100% require me, as a practicing plaintiff's lawyer, or law firms like mine, to disclose our lines of credit, to disclose loans we take out to help your constituents. So when people are injured and they need help, they come to people like me, and they don't have the money to pay for experts, to pay to the filing of their lawsuits, to pay for everything else. So they rely upon us, and we do that by hitting lines of credit and using other similar sources. And this unequivocally, as drafted, would require disclosure of that, and it only goes one way. We're the only ones that are required to disclose that. The defense has to disclose nothing. That is not fair. It is not equitable. And that's one reason for our strong opposition. The second reason is this. We have significant rule of law concerns for this. That is a term that has been bandied about recently, and I don't use it in a pejorative way. I use it in a very legal and scholarly way, and that is this. If you look at the last 2 sections, 12-1304 and 12-1305, this body would be usurping the role of the courts, violating separation of powers and saying this body, not judges, not trial judges, make determinations as to evidence and as to admissibility. That's fundamentally improper. And as a lawyer, that's a road I do not think we should walk down in this state. For those reasons and others, we urge unfavorable.
Thank you. Who's going next?
I am, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lorenzo Bellamy on behalf of the Alliance for Responsible Consumer Legal Funding, better known as ARC, in opposition to Senate Bill 894. With me is Eric Schuler, who's president of ARC. ARC represents companies that provide non-recourse consumer legal funding to individuals, usually injured plaintiffs, engaged and pending a resolution of their legal claim or case. Consumer legal funding and commercial litigation financing are not the same product, and this bill conflates the two. Mr. Schuler will explain in more detail, but commercial litigation financing are funds that support the actual litigation, law firms, business-to-business transactions, and range from $3 million on up. Consumer legal funding are funds, usually in the range of $500 to $50,000, provided directly to a consumer, usually an injured plaintiff in a personal injury case. And these are used to pay for bills such as rent or mortgage or groceries and utilities, et cetera. By providing such funds, the plaintiffs can stay engaged in the case longer, which I can appreciate why the insurance companies have a problem with this, thereby increasing the opportunity that a settlement offered by the defense is equitable and more in line with consumer fairness and protection that even our Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection tries to enforce for the residents of Maryland. This product somewhat levels the playing field. Consumer legal funding are non-recourse. They're only paid back if the plaintiff wins, and there are sufficient proceeds to ensure the plaintiff is fairly compensated before the funding company is paid. If the case is lost or there are insufficient funds at settlement, or in rare cases where the plaintiff abandons the case, short of any fraudulent behavior, the funding company has no recourse to get its funds back. That's why it's called non-recourse funding. We have proposed amendments to the bill modeled after New York, and thank you, Senator, for at least entertaining those. We have shared it with the sponsor and that clearly define what consumer legal funding is, provides additional protections and regulates the industry and the product in Maryland. And for those reasons, we ask an unfavorable of Senate Bill 894 as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Eric Shula. I'm the president for Alliance for Responsible Consumer Legal Funding. As stated, we're opposed to this current draft of legislation. I just want to maybe take a quick sidetrack from my comments here. Mr. Ettin brought up the bill in Utah. The bill in Utah right now is currently under revision, in which it is now adding in commercial litigation financing transactions to the existing consumer legal funding law. That bill has, through committee and through the House, made it unanimous with the support of the insurance industry, the consumer legal funding industry, the commercial litigation financing industry, and the trial bar. I think if Maryland is looking to bring in regulation, they maybe should look at a piece of the legislation that everybody agrees to. One of the things that it keeps bringing up here is whether or not these transactions are loans or not loans. I just want to touch on that real briefly here as to what other states have done. The courts in Minnesota, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and New Jersey have all stated that these transactions are not loans. In statute, in Washington State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Indiana, Vermont, Nevada, and Utah all state that this product is not a loan. Also, the Attorney General's office and departments in North Dakota and Virginia have also stated that this product is not a loan. A loan is a guaranteed sum certainty of repayment. There is no guarantee in this. What this product does is it allows the consumer to see the full value of their legal claim and not have to take a short settlement just because they're under financial stress. And I'll welcome any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Harrison Hosker, and I'm Legislative Director at the American Legal Finance Association, or ALFA. ALFA strongly supports the enactment of laws and ensures robust oversight and regulation of the consumer and legal funding industry. However, we must respectfully oppose this legislation as currently written. I will try to be brief as to not repeat anything, but ALFA has led the charge to help adopt sound consumer protection laws in numerous states, most recently in New York, as well as Nevada, Utah, Vermont, Oklahoma, Indiana, and Tennessee. In 2024, ALFA was also instrumental working with the National Conference of Insurance Legislators to adapt their Transparency and Third-Party Litigation Financing Model Act. And several years ago, our organization, in collaboration with the CFPB and the New York AG, filed an amicus brief in pursuit of deceptive funding practices. So we certainly care about ensuring that consumers are protected in every state. However, like my colleague here, Eric Shula, says, these cannot be categorized as a loan. Several states have found that they cannot be categorized as a loan. If this committee seeks true consumer protection, I again want to point you to the New York law that was just enacted unanimously in that state. This would provide rigorous penalties for anyone who violates the act, a far more comprehensive registration requirement in the state, and very clear and concise contract requirements that let a consumer know what they owe. It also has a first-of-its-kind guaranteed rate provision so that a consumer gets the guaranteed share of their proceeds. I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you. We'll hear from the virtual witness and then come back for questions. So Are you ready? Unmute.
I'm ready.
Unmute it. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Daiwai Shinthieman, and I'm the U.S. Chapter Chair of the International Legal Finance Association, or ILFA. We are opposed to SB 894 as it's currently drafted. First, as background, we're the trade association for the commercial litigation funding industry. I'm going to focus on the word commercial here because commercial is very distinct from consumer litigation funding, which the prior three witnesses discussed. On the commercial side, we're typically paying for legal fees, whereas consumers typically receive money for living expenses. Our investments are typically for millions of dollars, whereas consumers typically only receive a few thousand. Recipients of commercial funding are typically sophisticated and represented by counsel, whereas consumers receiving consumer funding are not. Our cases typically concern commercial harm, business-to-business disputes, whereas consumers typically have injury claims. We don't oppose SB 894 because it contains consumer protections. However, consumer protections should be limited to consumer litigation funding. While the bill appears focused to be on consumers in nature, it should be expressly limited in scope. There's two main consumer protections issues with the bill. First, the bill appears to include commercial claims through references to portfolios of actions. Even if individuals are litigants, they can still have commercial claims, such as disputes amongst business founders or investors who have been caught up in a Ponzi scheme. Second, the bill, as discussed, would treat litigation funding investments as loans. This is also inappropriate. These are not loans, they're non-recourse, they're extremely risky. And to the extent they were characterized as loans, it would dramatically reduce the ability of third-party capital because the interest rate available simply would not be high enough to justify the risk associated with complex commercial litigation. Finally, on disclosure, this bill would be extremely prejudicial and reveal sensitive work product of plaintiffs to defendants, giving them a playbook to leave the plaintiffs dry and otherwise not be able to litigate their cases. The disclosure, thanks very much.
Thank you. And I see our sponsor has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair. God, sorry. It's a Friday. Michael, I know we had an opportunity to chat. I understand your concerns, and when we met, I understand the issues that you raised, especially on the discoverability and the disclosure requirements that are contained within the bill. I'm curious, though, if we removed those disclosure requirements, would MAJ's position on the bill and what you articulated as far as what your opposition is, would MAJ be okay with the bill then?
If the disclosures were removed,
Yeah.
and if the other items we spoke about were removed, we would absolutely reevaluate our position. But there's just so much language in here now that really says this is a commercial loan, and it gets into our financing and how we help people.
Yeah.
But if we could reach that compromise, absolutely,
Okay.
Senator.
Yeah. I mean, it sounded like the crux of your concern was really on the discoverability or the disclosure really of your like lines of credit and things like that. That's what you want to protect.
Exactly,
Which,
Senator.
admittedly, I mean, I'd have to, consult with the folks on my sponsor panel, but I mean, it's not really related in some ways to the claim anyways, unless they're driving the litigation, so.
They don't drive the litigation.
Yeah.
And frankly, as I think everybody else here said, is we would love to find a compromise to achieve the goals that were stated to be expressed, but weren't really parroted in much of the testimony. I think what they're trying to get at through much of the language is how we fund our cases.
Yeah, I understand.
so,
Okay.
thank you,
All right,
Senator.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Of course.
And then for Mr. Schuler, or I suppose, Lorenzo, you can also answer. Are any of the companies which do this with consumers, are they operating in Maryland?
To my knowledge, none of my members are operating here right now.
Okay. And then I think maybe just one quick question for the virtual witness. It sounds as if, forgive me if I'm wrong, it sounds like your concern's really more focused on the commercial financing, is that right?
That's
Okay.
right. In other states, they've imposed monetary thresholds, say, like, this wouldn't apply to investments
Okay.
over a certain amount, like $500,000, just to clarify that really should be limited to injury claims for consumers.
Okay, and then I guess sort of the same questions that I asked Mr. Winkleman from Maryland Association for Justice, if we made some of those clarifications and remove some of the applicability to the commercial litigation or commercial financing, commercial litigation financing, your position would change. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Not Mr. Chair, for the record.
Thank you. Senator Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Schuler, it appears that the bill sponsor might be in a compromising mood right now. So would you say that there are changes to this portion, the consumer legal funding portion of the bill, that could be modified to bring the companies that you represent on board with this as well, too?
Yes, and, you know, as was stated, the bill in New York, I think, is a good model, or the bill that is currently going through Utah right now on a revision. Both those are good models that we can go with, and in fact, both of them have a disclosure provision in them that we are accepting with, which was brought up before from previous panels. They want to know if it's there. Well, what we're agreeing to in Utah and what we've agreed to in Indiana as well, and in the proposed legislation that we've given, is to say that if requested, you will say, yes, Mrs. Jones has one of these. But then it goes through the normal course of discovery as to whether or not you get the guts of the contract. But in the end, it's inadmissible against them. Our big problem with this is an automatic disclosure. You're not even asking for it, it's here. It's equivalent to attaching your bank statement when you're filing a lawsuit. You're telling everybody what your financial status is without anybody even asking for it.
Well, that's what I brought up to the last panel as well, too. Why is it important for them to know the financial status of the individual?
I think to know where the consumer is and whether or not they have these types of ability to stick it out.
And the same would be true for law firms, Senator.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. But I do, one, I think the important part is that we've seen in other states and, with your guys' participation in this, that you can come to an agreement and see legislation that would put the appropriate guardrails on, be available for consumer protection, probably talk about the fees that are associated with this, much like I guess the attorneys do as well too. When they put together their contract to say, I'll represent you, I'm sure some might say that those are astronomical fees that you might be paying an attorney to get to a certain point. But as long as the individual knows what those fees are, they make that decision to agree upon it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So with respect to that, Mr. Bellamy, did you want to say something?
Yes,
We'll
Madam
ask you a
Chair, may
question
I?
If you'd like me to. Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to proceed with that?
Thank you,
Go
Senator
further.
Hershey.
Yeah, thanks.
I think what Mr. Schuler said in terms of like working things out and trying to reach an agreement, I think, that sounds plausible if we can, come to the same understanding of what this product is. And my concern, and perhaps I, misread the bill, or maybe need to talk to the sponsor some more about this, but just conflating commercial litigation financing with consumer legal funding. The two are different, and this bill seems to merge the two, and then holds the consumer legal funding as a loan, but actually trying to get to the consumer by using commercial litigation financing. And so it's confusing, and I just think it needs to be clarified.
Okay. Well, I'll take the sponsor at her word that we're not looking at the commercial side of this, but I think that there is an ability to probably find a compromise if that's what we think is important, that some of these individuals can have financial assistance as they're trying to go through these, and sometimes very long settlement agreements. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make one very quick point, and maybe Mr. Winkleman, since you'll know the answer to this. Under Maryland Rule 2-402, what is this? C. Insurance agreements are discoverable, right? Any insurance agreements?
They are.
Right. So if somebody has, insurance that may be available to satisfy all or part of a judgment, those are discoverable, correct?
They are.
Yeah.
And the corollary is discoverable from our end. So,
Sure.
for example, if you do a like-for-like comparison, the insurance company has to disclose the insurance policy limits. We have to disclose what our medical bills are, what our lost wages are, what the non-economic
Sure.
damage cap is. So
But-
that's the like-for-like comparison.
But obviously if there's a third party that has an interest in the outcome of the litigation, just in the same way I think that some of these consumer third-party litigation financing may as well. You know, there's a comparison, I think, there to make. And so anyway, but that's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I may, the corollary, the Senator, respectfully, would be this. What this would ask for is our funding and our lines of credit.
I understand.
An insurance policy does not give us their funding, their line of credits, how much they have in reserves, their actuarial studies. That would be a like-for-like comparison.
Sure. You're right. I understand that. I'm just saying that the third-party litigation financing has an interest in the outcome of the loan. Maybe not so much your line of credit, but the ones that are getting paid out of the settlement or the verdict do have an interest in what the outcome of the litigation is. And so that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I address it real quick?
No, we don't.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Apologies.
If any senators have a question, they're welcome to ask it. Any more questions for this panel? No? Okay. Thank you very much. That ends the hearing for
Thank you.
Senate Bill 894. My speaker's not on. Senate Bill 546, and you will bring, I think, Martha Ainsworth with you from the Maryland Sierra Club. She's the other
Sure,
favorable,
she's
if she's here. Okay, well, that's fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, Senator Dahlia Attar here on behalf of Senate Bill 546. Oh, she is here. Thank you. I'm sorry. You were sitting right there. So I don't know about you, but many times I go to clean out my fridge because my kids are always leaving garbage in it. And I'm trying to figure out, is this good? Is this not good? And I can't because there are so many different labels on it. I'm trying to smell the food. And I just end up throwing out a lot of food that was probably good. Other people can't necessarily afford to do that, so instead, they're eating food that may not be good at that time. Currently, in every state and all different products use many different terms on products, on their date labels. There's sell by, use by, best by, and I can continue. My written testimony lists all of them that we've seen on food. What my legislation would do is it would standardize it in the state of Maryland, and it would have two dates, one for quality and one for safety. Best if used by is to indicate quality, and used by is to indicate safety. Now, I want to be clear about a couple of things. So first of all, this bill is based off of bipartisan legislation that's currently in the U.S. Senate. It was filed on July 2025. That would standardize food labeling to be just like this with those two terms. The state of California did pass this legislation. That's the only state so far that passed it individually. I was listening to the opposition in the House hearing, and they brought up good concerns. And one of them was, shouldn't this be done nationwide? And I do agree that is a good idea. But sometimes, as we've seen, if states, yes, there's legislation there, but it can sit there for a long time. But if states are individually showing, wait, this is important to us, and we go ahead and pass this, California passed it and other states passed it, it may quicken the legislation on the federal level. And if that does happen and they go pass it on the federal level, Maryland would already be in line if we pass this. Another concern was for our small businesses. One person was saying, well, small businesses are going to end up having to throw out a lot of their food and what they have there because they reach the date and it's time to go. So there are several amendments that you should have received, and one of that would resolve that concern, and it pushes the date out. There's a sell-through date, so it pushes it out so they have sufficient time to get rid of their stock because the goal is not to waste any food. Another concern was, and I think there was still opposition submitted currently, it's for like vitamins and things like that. So there's another amendment we have that satisfies that concern that says anything that's already federally regulated, we are not going to touch. And I'm not going to go into detail about all the amendments. You could read in my written testimony, and it's Friday afternoon, and I don't know about you, but I'm tired. But the amendments should resolve most of the concerns. I know the retailers will still come up, and that's, again, they'll explain what their concern is, and I understand. But I do believe it is still important for us to pass this. So hopefully, eventually down the line, sooner rather than later, on the federal level, they pass this nationwide ban. We want to make sure people are eating healthy food. We want to make sure we're not wasting food. And to be clear, this bill does not add any labels on food or items that currently do not require a label. So if something doesn't have it, we're not adding it. And last, one of the amendments that I forgot to mention earlier, and I do want to say, is milk products are being removed from this. Milk and eggs are both being removed from this with one of my amendments. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Ms. Martha, but I do want to say, I asked for a favorable report, but with the amendments that I submitted to you all. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Beidel and committee members. I'm Martha Ainsworth, Chair of the Maryland Sierra Club's Zero Waste Team, speaking in support of SB 546 on behalf of the chapter's members and supporters. According to Maryland's 2025 Recycling Needs Assessment, about 19% of the state's municipal solid waste, nearly 900,000 tons, is food waste. As it decomposes in landfills, food waste emits methane, a powerful greenhouse gas with a global warming potential more than 80 times that of carbon dioxide. At the same time, 1 in 8 Marylanders face hunger. Unclear and misleading food date labels contribute to food waste. Here are some examples from my kitchen. BB, best before, best of use by, BIUB, date produced, date printed, enjoy by, expiration date, sell by, freeze by, sell through, use by, use within 4 days of opening. And then the mysterious food packages that have a date with no explanation of what it means. This confusion leads to premature disposal of usable food. According to ReFed, standardized food date labels is one of the most cost-effective solutions for reducing food waste. SB 546 would reduce food waste, wasted food by first prohibiting the sale of food items labeled with a sell-by date that's visible to customers, and this is about really stock rotation, not about quality or safety. Second, requiring specific wording to indicate a quality date or safety date. And third, establishing a program to educate consumers on interpreting the labels. It would not limit the ability to sell, donate, or use a food item after the quality date. In sum, this bill is good for consumers. It increases food security, it reduces food waste, it conserves landfill space, and helps to prevent landfill methane emissions. For these reasons, the Sierra Club requests a favorable report on SB 546. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Do I have any questions for the sponsor or Martha? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. And as you predicted, we will hear from Kelly Locklear, the Maryland Retailers, and John McLucky, Consumer Healthcare Products Association. Maybe. Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. We are opposed to this bill. I do have to thank the sponsor, who was incredible and reached out to me. We did work very closely on the House side, but we do remain in opposition to this bill. I just want to start by clarifying a very important point about sell-by and why our industry uses it. It is a standard language tool used by industry to manage inventory, rotate stock, and maintain consistent product quality on our shelves. So from an operational standpoint, and we talk about this all the time in this committee, but state-by-state patchwork labeling requirements require significant costs. Yes, California moved forward with this, but you have to keep in mind that we do have regional operators, and there will be additional costs here. Manufacturers are going to have to produce multiple versions of the same labeling, segregate inventory based on destination, redesign packaging, adjust logistics and our distribution systems. Those costs compound quickly across the supply chain. Keep hearing a word this session about affordability, and yes, this will be passed on to consumers. Increased compliance and logistical costs happen in the form of higher food prices. So at a time when families are already struggling with food inflation, these added costs do matter. I also just want to bring up really quickly, and we really appreciate this, the bill now with the amendments would mimic California. It would allow 2 years. It would allow sell-through. It does exempt milk and eggs, which was really important because those are federally preempted and regulated in a different fashion. But I want to say this. Courts have consistently recognized our concern here, that food regulation is one of the clearest examples of why uniform standards are necessary. We are supporting, at the federal level, the Food Date Labeling Act. I know they don't move quickly. We are still in opposition. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Beidel, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Robbie McLucky, and I'm here on behalf of the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, representing the manufacturers of dietary supplements, over-the-counter medicine, and over-the-counter medical devices. While we support efforts to reduce consumer confusion around date labeling, SB 546 is not appropriate for dietary supplements and should not apply to them. To start, I want to thank Senator Attar for acknowledging our amendment request and continuing the dialogue on this issue. However, the amendment I believe that you are seeing today and was also offered on the House companion HB 410, exempting all federally regulated foods, which could be interpreted as all food, does not ease our opposition. Because nearly all food products are federally regulated in some capacity, this approach could create ambiguity rather than clarity. The proposed date labeling framework is designed for conventional foods, quality-based date labeling. However, dietary supplements are fundamentally different products that are regulated under a distinct federal system and utilize expiration dating. In CHBA's experience with legislation in other states, well-intentioned legislation unintentionally captures dietary supplements. It creates regulatory conflict and consumer confusion without improving safety, underscoring the need to clearly exclude supplements from food-focused date labeling laws. Dietary supplements must maintain the full labeled amount of ingredients through the end of their shelf life. And if a supplement no longer meets this labeled strength, even if it remains safe, it's no longer legally compliant and must be removed from the market. For that reason, supplements rely on FDA-regulated stability testing and clearly defined expiration dates, not quality-based terms like best if used by. Applying labeling that is appropriately designed for food to dietary supplements creates regulatory inconsistency. So for these reasons, we respectfully request that SB 546 be amended to expressly exempt dietary supplements consistent with federal law and legislative intent in other states. I appreciate your time, and I submitted my written comments for the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions for this panel. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, so that ends the hearing, and we will now go to Senate Bill 560, Senator Sidnor, and he's going to bring David Hill and Ian Miller, Continuing Care Retirement Communities Refunds.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Bidle and members of the committee. I believe this will be the last time that I get to testify in front of Finance before your retirement, so hopefully I'll give you a good one. Look, last September, I received an email from a constituent whose mother had moved out of a continuing care retirement community, which I'll refer to as a CCRC. In Baltimore County, this was Augsburg Village. Like many CCRC residents, this constituent's mother had signed a contract agreeing to pay what's called an entrance fee, which can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars up front. In addition to this, the constituent's mother paid a monthly charge. In exchange, Augsburg agreed to provide shelter and a basic medical care to enable the constituent's mother to continue living autonomously. When the constituent's mother vacated the community, the contract she had signed stated that Augsburg would return 80% of the entrance fee within 60 days of a new tenant moving in. This constituent contacted me because he and his mother had been waiting more than 4.5 years for her refund, which is more than $50,000. The provider told him that because the unit was still occupied, they could not issue the refund. Meanwhile, the provider's efforts to find an occupant for the unit were at best lukewarm and at worst actively detrimental. The constituent's mother had lived there for 5 years. It took nearly 5 years and intervention from my office and the Office of Consumer Protection for Augsburg to make its settlement offer, which my constituent accepted in order to end this whole event. In a moment, Mr. Hill is going to tell you a story of his own mother's experience with Augsburg, and it will sound very similar. But Mr. Hill is not a constituent that I'm referring to. Mr. Miller, who's with me also, is going to tell you about his grandmother's experience, and it will also sound very similar to these stories. Yet Mr. Miller is not the constituent who I'm referring to in this testimony. Separately, but during the same time frame, these three residents of Augsburg and their families experienced the same aggravating, unreasonable delays of the refunds that were rightfully owed. People should not have to wait 5 years and depend on the provider's good faith for a refund or tens of thousands of dollars. Although the bill in front of you introduces a hard cap on the CCRC's requirement to refund a former resident or their beneficiary after discussing with other providers and the Department of Aging, the committee should have two amendments. One that removes the cap and specifically targets the bad actors, and the other that we worked on actually with the industry. First, if a provider puts the unit on a rental market, uses it for different purposes, or otherwise takes the unit out of the CCRC inventory, the provider must refund the former resident within 90 days. This would prevent a provider from abusing a loophole we've seen in existing contracts. If a refund is only processed with a new CCRC resident moves in and no CCRC resident ever moves in because no CCRC is offered, no refund is ever processed. This provision solves a short-term problem, while the second provision of the amendment will offer a solution, an ongoing solution. And that particular piece that I talked about was something that was discussed with the industry, and you'll find it, I believe, in leading edges within their testimony. The second, like I said, the Department of Aging currently has no real authority with teeth, and it can only make inquiries to providers when someone reaches out with a complaint. The department can ask questions and point to regulations, but it cannot assess penalties or fines. With another amendment that we have, we would grant the department limited authority to assess fines in the CCRC provider, or if the CCRC provider fails to provide a contractual refund within a reasonable time. Instead of the hard cap I originally proposed, the softer cap allows providers acting in good faith to engage in problem solving with the department and a resident, while providers who fail to do so will face actual consequences. For folks waiting for their refund, it is not just about the money. Even though we can be talking about tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's about seeking closure. People generally do not move out of CCRCs because they need less support. They typically move into higher supported facilities like memory care hospice, which can be expensive. Some might pass away before they need these other facilities, but regardless of the reason, the transition from a CCRC is often emotionally difficult for the resident and their families. And the last thing that they need is constant worry about whether they'll ever actually get their money back. For these reasons, I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 560, and I would like to have Mr. Hill speak to his experience.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for giving me this opportunity to talk about Senate Bill 560. My name is David Hill, and I'm testifying in support of the bill on behalf of my 93-year-old mother, Carolyn Hill. Our family has been going through a frustrating experience for 2.5 years with Heritage at Augsburg, a CCRC facility in Baltimore County. We've been trying to recoup the agreed-upon 80% of Carolyn's original entrance deposit, amounting to $174,000. Carolyn moved into her Augsburg apartment in 2017 upon signing the residency agreement, which indicated if and when she moved out, she'd be refunded 80% of her entrance deposit, contingent on her apartment being reoccupied first. Our family hoped that Mom would be at her Augsburg until her final days, but unfortunately, she later suffered some serious health problems, and Augsburg therefore required that she vacate her independent living apartment, which she did in July 2023. She now lives in an assisted living facility in Westminster, Maryland. The egregious issue that drove me to testify today is that Augsburg is not carrying out its contractual obligations in good faith to refund Carolyn's agreed-upon percentage of her entrance deposit. They claim they'll refund Carolyn's deposit when her old apartment is reoccupied, but they fail to follow up with honest and transparent efforts to reoccupy the unit. And in doing so, they unjustly enrich themselves by claiming no interest from any prospective new residents. This in turn allows them to withhold significant funds owed my mother. I think this appears to be outright elder abuse. Thank you, Senator Sydnor, for your efforts on this bill. In sum, my family and I believe that passage of SB 560 would put us and prior and future CCRC residents on more equal footing with the industry. It would hold facilities more accountable to take timely, honest, and transparent actions with contractual obligations to refund entrance deposits. And I recommend SB 560 be written to apply retroactively to cover the many families with existing contracts and experiencing similar circumstances. And it also needs to be strengthened as proposed to address bad actors like Augsburg. Thank you again for allowing me to testify in support of this important legislative effort.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ian Miller. I work for Senator Sidner, but I have a personal connection to this issue. My grandmother, Joan Miller, was a resident at Augsburg Lutheran Village from 2014 until her passing in December 4th, 2020. After her passing, my dad was consistently frustrated by Augsburg's lack of effort to sell my grandmother's apartment. Multiple times he drove to Augsburg in an attempt to meet with people regarding the situation. On the occasions that someone did meet with him, they would always say, "We're trying to sell your mother's apartment, but we have yet to get a buyer." On July 22nd, 2022, he visited Augsburg again and was taken to the apartment. What he found was appalling and enraging. There were mouse traps and bug traps on the floor. The walls had mold stains on them. There was no top on the oven. There was food and drink in the refrigerator, and the staff had been using the apartment. Plainly, the apartment had never been shown to prospective buyers in the 19 months since my grandmother's passing, but seemed to be used in some sort of capacity for workers in the facility. Outraged, he demanded the entrance fee specified in the contract my grandmother had signed, as Augsburg had not lived up to its contractual end of the agreement, and they did not pay it. He wrote in the submitted testimony to the committee, "In the next 3 years, I did not contact Augsburg. It was too painful for me. My mother was a devout Christian who chose Augsburg because of her religious affiliation. She was the most moral, loving person I've ever known. I resigned myself to the fact that Augsburg was simply a bottom-line, money-making organization, and I just wanted to put that chapter behind me." Then out of the blue, in October of 2025, he received a call and was offered a settlement of 40% of the $80,000 that was owed. Ultimately, he and his siblings settled for 67% of what they were contractually owed. Additionally, despite the contract requiring them to periodically update regarding the status of my grandmother's apartment, he only received one email in a period of 5 years. And I'm over my time here, but I just want to say it's really critical that we give the Department of Aging stronger regulatory authority and the ability to impose fees on bad actors, so there is an incentive structure and some sort of pressure can be put on these companies that are bad actors and stringing working families along for money they're entitled to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Hill. So this CCRC is continuing care residential communities. So your mom left the apartment and went to a different place for the continuing care?
She did. She's not in continuing care facility anymore. She's in an assisted living facility up in Westminster. But the fact that she had some serious health issues, the Augsburg basically said you can't live there anymore. They offered us some alternatives that were not satisfactory at all. And we decided to take her to a place that was more amenable to her needs up in Westminster.
I'm not familiar with Augsburg, but I thought continuing care meant people went from independent living to assisted living to nursing home. You know, that was all available. That's why I thought it was continuing care. Apparently that's not true with Augsburg.
It is. I'm not a CCRC expert, but Augsburg does offer that. They have an independent living, they have a assisted living, and they have a memory care. But all assisted living and all memory care is not created equal, obviously. So we did an analysis, what they offered, what they didn't offer, and as a family, we decided that someplace else was more appropriate.
Thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Just helped me understand. Do I have any other questions for this panel? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Madam Chair, you do have the amendments that I mentioned?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Allison Siborowski, Aaron Greenfeld, and Dana Kaufman. Maybe. I know it's Friday afternoon, so we're...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Siborowski had to leave. She had a
her son had a play, so she had to leave by 3 o'clock, so.
We have somebody here whose daughters are in the father-daughter dance this afternoon, so some things, family's important.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mind if I go first? So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Aaron Greenfield here on behalf of Leading Age Maryland. We are favorable with the amendments offered by the sponsor. I want to thank the sponsor and his staff for working with us. What we learned in the process of going through this bill is that Augsburg is no longer a CCRC. So what the senator actually identified is a loophole in the law, that there's no longer a CCRC in place. So with respect to the return of the entrance fee, there's no sort of hammer to ensure that that return is refunded. One of our amendments, as Senator Sidner mentioned, makes clear that if the unit is in fact taken offline permanently as a CCRC, the provider must provide within 30 days a notice to the subscriber or the estate, and 90 days must return that entrance fee. And so that's one amendment we have offered and agree with the sponsor. The second one is striking that cap of 2 years, which can be problematic from a bond covenant standpoint and potentially higher interest rates. So for those reasons, and I should also mention that Augsburg is not a member of Leading Age Maryland, and I don't believe they're a member of Lifespan. So we worked in good faith with the sponsor, and for those reasons, respectfully request a favorable with amendments report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dana Kaufman. I'm here on behalf of Lifespan Network, and we also support the amendment on the Maryland Department of Aging, the enforcement. I actually haven't seen that language, so I would like to take a look, but I believe it sounds very reasonable. And it is unfortunate because I think the two associations have worked very hard to address the concerns that have arisen within about the entrance fee deposits, and to hear of an actor who is going around it in bad faith and exploiting a loophole. We believe that that does need to be shut down, and we support the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kramer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quickly so I understand, Dana, Aaron, you all support the bill with the sponsor's amendments. Is that correct? Because I couldn't tell whether you said you had your own amendments, and if yours were adopted, you'd support it. Or you all support the bill with the sponsor's amendments?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion. We support the bill with the sponsor's amendments. We work with the sponsor to devise those amendments, with the exception of the one that gives the Department of Aging the authority to assess a civil penalty, which Leading Age Maryland is fine with. I understand Lifespan hasn't seen it yet, but we are fine with the amendments as offered by the sponsor.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I would just like to be able to see it first.
So I guess we still need to hear from Lifespan on the amendment?
Well, yeah, I would just like, I'm meeting with them on Monday. I just
Okay,
would like them
that's
to take
fine.
a look at it first before I.
No, I'm sure you'll get back to us.
Yeah,
Dana.
and
Thank
it
you.
sounds reasonable.
Thank you. Okay, that seems to end the hearing on Senate Bill 560. Now we're going to go to Senate Bill 656, Public Health Cosmetic Products, Enforcement and Penalties for Prohibited Ingredients. And we have Senator Henson with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I bring up my panel?
Yes, you may. I have Dr. Clement Banda virtually. We'll bring that person up. And then LaSonia Nick McGriff, Lisa Treadwell, and Michelle Pittman.
Yes.
Okay. And we don't have any in opposition, Senator, so.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, colleagues, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, colleagues who are remaining here with us on this fine Friday afternoon. Thank you all. For the record, I'm Senator Shanika Henson, here to present Senate Bill 656, Public Health Cosmetic Products Enforcement and Penalties for Prohibition Ingredients, which we've titled the Crown and Care Act. I want to first thank this committee and the diligence of the Senate for passing in 2021 a piece of legislation that's incredibly impactful, well, what we know can be impactful, but that legislation banned the use in Maryland of a number of harmful chemicals that are found commonly on the shelves in hair products. Some of those chemicals are familiar to this committee. They include formaldehyde, they include methylene glycol, they include mercury, they include isopropyl parabens. They also include a number of PFAS chemicals, which this body has worked very diligently to keep out of our water supply. But these chemicals, one of the ways that they get there is being in these cosmetic ingredients, which then, of course, find their way into the supply. But most importantly, when these cosmetic ingredients are applied to the skin, to the hair, to the body, they have a number of really harmful consequences. One of the things that we've seen is that in women, the prevalence of uterine fibroids, of different cancers, hormone dysregulation, when these products are applied to the skin and the body. Now, if the body here, if we as a General Assembly have already banned these products, then why are we here today with this bill and this panel that's assembled as well? That's because if you walk into any beauty supply store today, you will find still on the shelves products containing all of these chemicals that we sought fit to ban from being sold here in the state of Maryland. Nevertheless, they continue to be sold. We understand that when the products are sold and used, that these harmful consequences are happening disproportionately to women. And then if we distill that a layer further, even more disproportionately to Black women because of the prevalence of some of these harmful things that happen to the body. So for that, colleagues, we have the bill that's before you today, Senate Bill 656. What it would do is put in place some enforcement mechanisms so that we can finally realize the benefit of banning these products, because banning them was the first step. Now making sure they're off of the shelves and not being used by consumers, that's the second and most important step in keeping people safe. The way that the bill works is it will put in place a private cause of action for people who have been harmed by these products to make sure that they're removed from the shelves and that they can get the benefit of damages awarded to them so they can recover. You'll hear from some of the practitioners in the industry that are here today. Sometimes the result of this might not be a cancer or uterine fibroids, but sometimes it's harmful disfigurement, permanent hair loss, and a host of other things that can happen. So based on that, I would submit this bill for your consideration and ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 656. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator, would you like Dr. Banda to go next, or?
Certainly, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Dr. Banda, do you want to give us your, unmute and give us your testimony?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for allowing me to speak. I am a local dermatologist here in Howard County, and I'm here supporting the bill as written. And my experience is treating people who are harmed by these products. First, I must actually commend Maryland for putting this into law. It's very exemplary, and it's important that we actually enforce the law, and this is the reason that I am standing here in support. My own experience is that these products damage people's hair, damage people's skin and hair follicles. Now, here's the thing. These products are used by teenagers, and by the time they're 20, they realize, oh, I don't like this anymore. But guess what? The damage is done, and I see them in their 40s and 50s for something they did as minors in their teen years. So it's really important that we have this effectively enforced, because by the time people actually realize they're thinking for themselves, the damage has been done. But not only that, I also see people when they're actually using these products with allergies, burns. Those are more immediate. But again, the lasting effect is that years later, decades later, in their 40s and 50s, they come to me for damage that was done a long time ago. So again, I urge support of this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Banda. Who would like to go next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'll be very brief. It is Friday afternoon. My name is Michelle Pittman, and thank you for allowing me to present today. I come before you as a consumer to talk about the Crown and Care Act. The Crown and Care Act aims to strengthen Maryland's public health protections around cosmetic products. I am a fibroid survivor, and I can attest to hair dye and being burned by some of the chemicals. This bill will build on existing Maryland cosmetic ingredient restrictions, ensuring that products containing this prohibited harmful ingredients, including certain chemicals commonly found in hair products, cannot be manufactured, sold, delivered, held, or offered for sale in the state. This bill will also create civil penalties. It will strengthen enforcement of Maryland's existing chemical ban, and it will also offer enforcement authority. This bill establishes, it can establish a restitution and research funds where civil penalties and restitution will fund medical screenings, treatment, research related to fibroids, uterine cancer, hair loss, and related health conditions. That concludes my presentation.
It was quick. Who's next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair, and the members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Lisa Lane Treadwell, and I've been in the beauty profession for 45 years. And 39 of those years, I have owned and operated Lisa's of Annapolis Salon in Annapolis, Maryland. And I've also served on the Maryland State Cosmetology Board. The health and welfare of the consumers of Maryland is my passion and concern, and this is why I'm supporting Senate Bill 656, the Crown and Care Act, because cosmetics and hair products are the least regulated consumer products, and ingredients labeling of hair extensions and synthetic braiding hair is minimal or non-existent. So it is nearly impossible for consumers to make informed choices and avoid harmful ingredients. As a seasoned professional, it is crucial that we hold the manufacturers of these products accountable as we provide protection for the consumers of Maryland from these harmful hair chemicals. And I want to thank Senator Shanika Henson, and I request a favorable support for this bill.
Thank you. And we have one more witness, LaSonia.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is LaSonia Nick McGriff. I'm a Maryland hairstylist, salon owner, and natural hair specialist with over 28 years of experience working directly with clients throughout our communities. I'm not here today as a scientist or a manufacturer. I'm here as the professional who sees the real-life consequences of improper scalp and hair care every single day when clients sit in my chair looking for answers. My work focuses heavily on scalp wellness, natural hair care, and hair loss restoration, where I regularly help clients repair damage after years of chemical exposure. I am here today in strong support of the Crown and Care Act. For nearly 3 decades, I have stood behind the salon chair listening to women's stories while also witnessing patterns that cannot be ignored. I have seen scalp burns, chronic irritation, thinning hair, biofilms, and long-term hair loss connected to repeated exposure to chemical hair products marketed by Beauty Solutions. Many clients believe that their hair is the problem, but as professionals, we often see that the real issue is the prolonged exposure to products containing harmful chemicals, chemicals that strip nail polish, products that consumers assume are safe simply because they are legally sold. One of the greatest challenges facing licensed professionals today is the lack of transparency in product labeling. Stylists and consumers rely on manufacturers to clearly disclose ingredients and risks. However, many products do not adequately communicate potential dangers, leaving professionals unknowingly exposing clients and ourselves to harmful substances. Consumers assume that if a product is legally sold, it has been properly vetted and clearly labeled. Without accurate labeling and strong enforcement, informed consent becomes impossible. This bill helps close the gap by strengthening accountability and ensuring that manufacturers, distributors, and retailers follow the same safety standards expected of licensed professionals. As stylists, we are trained to protect the health and safety of our clients. We should not bear the burden of deciphering incomplete ingredient disclosures or navigating inconsistent enforcement. After 28 years behind the chair, I can confidently say informed beauty requires honest labeling and accountable manufacturing. Because healthcare begins with a healthy scalp, scalp care is healthcare, and Maryland families deserve both beauty and safety. I have cared for Maryland families through generations. Supporting this bill is supporting their health, their dignity, and their future. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the service to the Maryland families. Thank you, Senator Hinston.
Thank you all for your testimony. Senator Kramer.
Madam Chair. Senator, quick question, and I'm trying to understand the penalty provision, and perhaps you can give me a greater understanding. It says, in addition to any other penalties under this title, a person who violates this section is liable for civil damages sustained by the individual resulting from the violation. So I'm trying to grasp, is the violation having the product on the shelf? Because that's what, as I read it, the law says you cannot sell, manufacture, or, let's see, deliver, hold, offer for sale in the state a cosmetic product that contains, and then there's that long list of items. So I'm just trying to understand, am I correct? The violation would be that you have the product, that you're either manufacturing or you have it on for sale? Or is the goal that, in other words, because I'm trying to figure out what would be the damage sustained by the individual having the product on the shelf, or is the goal if it caused harm to the individual? I guess that's what I'm trying to create here. The way it's worded, it just appears as though the damage would be you've sold the product or you have it on your shelf in violation of state law.
I appreciate your question, and thank you, Senator, for it. It makes me feel like I'm downstairs in JPR because of the way that it works in a civil lawsuit. You have your cause of action, and then you have your damages. If we were in a criminal context, you would have guilt or innocence, and then you would have sentencing. So the cause of action is exactly as you described and identified. On the second page of the bill, the existing part of the code, the prohibition on manufacturing, selling, delivering, holding, or offering for sale, that's the cause of action.
So that's the violation
That's
that's
the
referred
violation.
to in that paragraph.
And then the damages would be much like a sentencing, which is different. The damages is when you assess what harm was caused to the person as a result of the violation. And that's when the court can award damages.
But
So
the
the
way I think
testimony
this
that you
is
heard-
worded, the violation is having the product on the shelf.
That's right. But if a
Not harm
person,
that was caused to the individual, but the violation is you had it on the shelf, and that's the violation. And
That's
I
correct.
just want to make sure, do I understand that correctly?
You do.
The violation isn't a claim that it did harm. The violation is, hey, you've got this product on the shelf.
you do. The harm is the necessity in getting damages, because there are times where in a civil lawsuit, you prove your cause of action, a person's done what they're not supposed to do, but you don't get any damages if you're not harmed by them doing what they're not supposed to do. A court could say, I'll award $1 for nominal damages because you don't have any harm. Yes, they violated the law, but the end result to you was no harm. So what would happen here is if a manufacturer or distributor had those products, were selling them in violation of the law, you've then proven that they violated it in a civil cause of action. But to advance to the second phase where damages are awarded, a person would have to show that they were harmed by that activity.
I still don't think the wording, and we can talk offline.
Happy to.
I'm just not sure that it is worded as such at the moment, that if the goal is it has caused personal harm to the individual, I'm not sure the wording gets us there, but then I guess that just simply begs the question, could somebody file suit now and assert that this product has caused this condition in my body and file suit?
Yes and no. The law in itself as a prohibition, if the law doesn't expressly provide a private cause of action, then the default setting is that the law is there as a regulatory step where only the state can enforce it by going through, doing an inspection. The General Department of Health could enforce the law. But the law has to say that in order for an individual to use the protections in the law, there has to be an expressly written private cause of action. So that's what this bill does, is provides that private cause of action. In addition to the bill text that's in front of you, we are working with the drafters on a number of amendments that I would present to the committee. Included in those amendments would allow the Attorney General's office, using the Consumer Protection Act, to also be able to pursue to make sure that these chemicals and these products were removed from the shelf. So it would give our AG the ability to step in as well.
All right, I'm still, the distinction I'm trying to get at is simply, are we trying to have an enforcement mechanism to get these products off the shelf?
Yes.
And I get that. But do we need legislation to establish the fact that there was a harm? In other words, with the Johnson & Johnson products and the harm that that did to women, that was a consequence of simply establishing the fact Johnson & Johnson had this product did do harm, and there was then civil action that flowed as a consequence from that harm. And with it, and that it would not have required something in statute anywhere in order to pursue the, making the individual whole or assessing the damage.
Certainly.
So I guess I'm just still trying to understand, is the goal here, let's get these products off the shelf because we've never had any mechanism for doing that? Or is the goal to say, and then I have that question, these products have caused harm, there is liability as a consequence if you use these products? I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to, maybe that kind of boiled it down a little bit, just so I understand.
If your question were a multiple choice, I would check E, all of the above, because that's what it is. Currently, you're absolutely right. There exists at law a cause of action if a person has been negligent, if there is a product manufacturer and they know, but to get there, you have to prove that they had a duty to the consumer, they breached that duty to the consumer, they were the proximate cause of harm, and then there was actual harm. So what statutes like this do that create a private cause of action is they make it very, very clear and express based on public policy what that duty is to the consumer. And then the private cause of action, it gets you to that next step where you can sue using the civil law. Now, it would be wonderful if we had resources that we were willing to invest, because we do have resources, but if we were willing and able to invest them into the sort of enforcement that would do inspections routinely, that would look for these products and remove them from the shelves, that certainly would be a method for doing it. But sometimes what we do as a state is we instead will look to the private industry. We will instead look to the market, look to the ability for civil lawsuits to be able to do the corrective steps in that behavior. So that's what this bill does. It creates the opportunity for the civil liability to correct the behavior of putting those harmful products on the shelves.
So the private right of action would be simply, I go in, I see these products have these chemicals on the shelf, and now I can file suit.
You would
That
not.
would be the private right of action, as opposed to just simply a state regulatory scheme where it would have to be enforced by some state entity, whether it's the Office of the Attorney General or something. But my private right of action, if that's the goal, would be, I go in and I see the products are on the shelf, they contain these chemicals. I can then initiate litigation to file suit against that company or the business for having these products on their shelf.
You couldn't
That
recover.
would be the private right of action.
Yes and no. You could not recover damages unless you were harmed. So if you were able to prove that they were in violation of the statute and you invested the time and expense in an attorney and the filing fees and the service of process fees to pursue litigation against them, you could do that, but you could only recover damages if you were harmed.
Okay. All
Senator,
right, thank you.
Council will talk with you more offline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Washington?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the bill. Seems like a really great bill. This bill has it in private rights of action, right?
That's right.
Okay. This committee has a history of removing that from bills. What and how important is it for you to make sure this works and happens, and why is it so important to have it in this bill?
Thank you, Senator. That's a very, very thoughtful question. It is important because that's really the enforcement tool that the bill provides. We've already banned the chemicals and they're still on the shelves. We have to take the next step if we want to keep people safe. So that's why the private right of action is essential to having any effectiveness here.
It's typically a lot of business lobbyists come in here and say we don't want these private rights of action because obviously they'll be held accountable. But in this bill, it seems like that's the one tool that could be used to help resolve this issue that affects a lot of Black folks out there.
Very much so. Thank you, Senator.
Yep.
I don't see any further questions, Senator. Thank you for this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
One quick question, Senator. Is this in other states? Has the ban on these products been in other states also?
There has been, yes.
Wow. Okay, thank you
you.
very much. Okay, Senator Jackson, Senate Bill 783, Credit Unions, Mergers and Consolidations. You have Rory Murray and Janelle Burgoyne.
Good afternoon, Chair Bidle, Vice Chair Hayes, fellow members of the Senate Finance Committee. For the record, I am Senator Carl Jackson here to present Senate Bill 783, Credit Unions, Mergers and Consolidations, Alterations, and Voting Requirements. SB 783 updates Maryland's credit union merger law to match the federal credit union standard. Under this bill, when two credit unions merge, the member owners of the credit union that is being absorbed must still affirmably vote to approve the merger, but the members of the surviving credit union are not required to vote. In plain terms, if Credit Union A is merging into Credit Union B, only the members of Credit Union A would vote on the merger, while the board of directors of Credit Union B, who are all members of the credit union and elected by their peers, will continue to be responsible for approving the transaction. Because of the products, services, and governance of the surviving credit union are not changing, its existing members genuinely do not need to vote, while the members of the merging credit union are being asked to join a new institution and therefore must affirmably choose to do so. This change aligns Maryland law with the longstanding federal standard used by the National Credit Union Administration and puts Maryland's 7 state-chartered credit unions in parity with their federal credit union peers. By removing an unnecessary second member vote on the surviving side, the bill streamlines straightforward mergers while preserving member protections, ensuring members of the credit union that is being absorbed retain the right to approve the merger, maintaining full regulatory oversight and saving time and money that can be instead used for member services and other products. I respectfully request a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Rory, you want to go next?
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the committee, remaining members, surviving members of the committee, Rory Murray here on behalf of the Maryland DC Credit Union Association. That's the entire bill. As far back as I can find, at least since 1983, under the Federal Credit Union Act and the NCUA regulations, it's only required the members of the merging credit union to do a full membership vote when a merger takes place. And that's because they're the ones that are going to have to make some changes. They're either going to have to get new cards, meet new people. They're basically joining a new credit union. The members of the surviving credit union, for them, nothing changes. There's no difference. Life goes on. There's no noticeable difference. So they've never been required to vote. For reasons I don't know, Maryland's credit union statute, at least since 2001, has required this. It came up relatively recently in a conversation with the commissioner's office, and I don't want to speak for them, but they basically said, why don't you guys just try to change that in the law? It doesn't make sense. And Janelle here can talk about administratively how it's burdensome, but it's basically to set up a meeting of the full membership of a credit union, there's a several month time period. There can be several thousands, if not tens of thousands of votes that are tabulated, all for folks who, at the end of the day, there's no noticeable change to the way they go about their lives. So this is a small but meaningful change to the Maryland Credit Union Statute, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janelle?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Janelle Burgoyne. I am representing the State Employees Credit Union of Maryland, also known as CQ. I hope you all are members. If not, maybe you can think about that after you leave this afternoon. But CQ represents Maryland's state chartered credit unions and the members that they serve. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 783, which basically makes a narrow technical change to Maryland law to align our credit union merger process with federal law. Reminder, credit unions are not-for-profit institutions. We are member-owned financial cooperatives that are governed by a board of directors that are democratically elected by the membership. Today, Maryland's an outlier, so looking for this change to basically ease our process from a merger perspective. Strategically, in our space, mergers and acquisitions are a growth mechanism for us as an institution, and this just is an additional hurdle that our federal credit unions do not have to jump through, and just looking for a favorable report on this bill to ease some of the administrative hurdles that we would have to go through in the future, and also to bring us with parity with federal law. So with that, I am asking for a favorable report on Senate Bill 783. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. I think it's an easy bill. You just never know.
I reached out to the bankers well before and said, are we good with this? And they said, we're good with it.
Okay.
It's credit
Well,
union to credit
Thank you
union
for that.
mergers only.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
We have one more bill with the senator presenting, Senator Kramer, on Senate Bill 881, commercial financing.
All righty then. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Ben Kramer introducing Senate Bill 881. Colleagues, this bill is very familiar to you all, and it deals with the common sense transparency of these fintech loans, and simply requiring that they make sure the borrower knows what the APR is, what the cost of the money is going to be. You've heard this repeatedly, this bill, so I'm going to simply say thank you for having passed it unanimously, I believe each of the last 3 years, and I believe it has been passed unanimously off the Senate floor each of the last 3 years. And although I did have some refresher comments, I don't think it's necessary at this late hour. And I'll look forward to once again trying to get it across the finish line with our colleagues across the street in the House. And with that, I will ask if you have any questions or need a refresher. Other than that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I do have questions.
Okie dokie.
And I don't remember these questions from prior years. I had some people reach out to me that have buy large equipment like Caterpillar, like $2.5 million, $3 million contracts, and they don't want to be covered by this bill because they have a different way that they negotiate their contracts.
And I would say to you, Madam Chair, they have come in repeatedly in the past with the same opposition, and the committee saw fit to, I believe, at least last year, and the bill has been back a couple of times, to not exempt them, in that at the end of the day, the bill simply requires provide an APR. It doesn't interfere with the way they are doing things, and they can create whatever it is the way they do their financing. And I am not aware, and perhaps they provide you that information, because if they did, and this has been exempted in New York and California, then by all means, Madam Chair, I would be perfectly content with their being exempted out here, short of their being able to document that they were not included in New York and California, the two largest financial markets in the country, that now have been doing this for several years. And in fact, Madam Chair, when I first introduced the bill, the argument against it was nobody's doing it. Well, California and New York passed it, and then the next year the argument was, well, the courts are not going to uphold it. Well, the courts did uphold it, and then the following year the argument was it's on appeal, and that the appellate courts would not uphold it. Well, the appellate courts did uphold the state laws in New York and California. So then finally the opposition came back and said, look, everybody's going to leave the marketplace now. Well, it turned out that New York and California have a thriving industry, that the only individuals who left that marketplace were either those who had to thrive on the fact they were hiding the APR and collecting this huge interest, or they did, leaving the marketplace to the legitimate actors, the good actors. So it's been in effect, and I would ask you, if they have in fact been exempted out of California and New York, I'd welcome the same exemption. And if they have not been, obviously they can thrive in that marketplace, because California is what, the fourth largest economy in the world? And if they can make it there, they can make it anywhere.
That's New York, Senator.
So, and there's that. And I will say, Madam Chair, there is, the bill has provided for the Office of Financial Regulation to have a licensing regime. The office has asked me to provide the committee with an amendment. They wanted it, it allows for it. They have presented me with an amendment to actually establish what it would look like using the existing language they use elsewhere in statute, and that amendment will be forthcoming next week to the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.